Love you too. Yeah. Thanks for being here. This is kind of a lot to ask, so I appreciate that y'all are here listening to my story. Chapter 1. Flipping. As for what's down there, I haven't the slightest clue, but I intend to find out. Another one? Miva looked up from a neat stack of papers on her desk, visibly rattled. She held a glass of cold lemonade just above the table, halfway to taking a sip. How old was that boy? 5 kill arrests, said her companion. Oh no. She set her glass back on the table with resignation. That's about Leva's age. I wonder if she knew him. A short pause. Maybe this'll finally make her and Fid realize how dangerous a full slip really is. Leva's friend considered how often they saw Leva sneaking around corners in the market district, tugging her small-statured friend around by the wrist and sitting on the porch for her elder's lecture. Wouldn't get your hopes up, Mev. Leva, I just want you to know that I'm the only one in all of Bilia who thinks you're onto something. 2 pairs of feet paced around a patch of wild grasses, searching for a perfectly flat spot. There was no response, but Fid didn't need one to keep going. It's foolish, they say. It won't work, they say. It's not supposed to work yet, Fid. This is just an experiment. Leva waved her hand in his general direction, unwilling to be distracted from her search. That was enough for Fid. You're right. Well, let's go over it one more time. Slip lemons? Check. He looked over to Leva as she prodded a hefty tuft of dew wheat. Do we need any other supplies? No, Fid. Newly barefoot, Leva tossed her shoes to Fid. He caught them unconsciously, toeing off his own shoes and stacking both pairs together. Great. Supplies? Check. And the plan? I'll go upside down and slip, but only to my ankles, so there's no danger. You count and give me 2 taps when I should come up. Before Fid could respond, Leva popped a tiny slip lemon into her mouth, cartwheeled into a handstand, and closed her eyes. As she readied herself, the soft lines of Leva's upside-down face contorted into a cramped frown. Fid snickered at her attempt to concentrate. Leva repressed her own smirk, both cheeks twitching with effort, but a moment later, she let her shoulders drop, erased her face, and focused. Leva's hands sunk into the ground. The rest of her body followed, until all that was left on this side of the world were the balls of her feet, pointing to the sky. Fid hopped to it and started at slip counting with a matched look of concentration. He swallowed a slip lemon just under a quarter the size of Leva's and let his left foot sink into the ground. Then he waited. After some time, the ground surrounding his foot started to transform, as if the dirt was dancing from gas to liquid to solid, though Fid knew that it wasn't the ground that was changing. Unslipping always felt so bizarre. Once his foot was properly stuck in place, he ate another quarter lemon and immediately activated it to free his foot again. Okay, after I go through this one, she gets 2 more, max, said Fid, tone stern. There was no response, but again, Fid didn't need one to keep going. He repeated the process twice more, exacting with his slip lemon measurements. The moment the 4th quarter lemon wore off, foot stuck solid, Fid leaned over to Leva's toes and gave 2 taps. Leva stayed put. 2 more taps. Leva shook her feet no. Just a little longer, Fid. 2 more taps, harder this time. Leva's feet all but rolled their eyes. Then the right one wiggled a bit, swung back and forth from toe to heel, and picked up some momentum. Leva's body followed it, flipping out from under the ground in a half circle around her foot fulcrum. Fid fixed her with a look, unimpressed by her acrobatics. Fid ate another lemon and freed his foot. You know I'm all in, but that was a little close, he pointed out. Leva dipped her toe back into the ground, grinning, and swirled through the neighboring grass with a flourish. No way! The slip still hasn't even worn off yet. Plus, I've got my reserve, so even if it had, I wouldn't have gotten stuck anyways. You know reserves are for emergencies only! Fid knew that Leva knew that and chose to drop it. Regardless, I see you're empty-handed. Rude. She crossed her arms in a huff. At first, when I unslipped my hand to grab a Remani worm, I just got stuck. Then I semi-slipped my hand and got one, but I forgot to semi-slip the worm too, so it just got crushed between my hand and the dirt. Leva's hand circled an imaginary Remani worm, then curled into a fist. It was gross, by the way. So if you had just given me a bit more time, I definitely would have gotten one. Try again tomorrow? Her gaze was hopeful and certain. Fid couldn't help but smile. Fine, but the first one you catch is mine. Chapter 2, Full Slip. How can the other billions be so aversive to discovery? They think me curious. I think them boring. So I've been thinking. That's a first! The quip was immediate. Fid had lots of chances to practice, and he was finally getting his timing down. Hilarious, Fid. Leva, silence, poked her toes into the dew wheat and switched the silky fronds to and fro. She tended to fuss with anything around her, as if her mind was racing out of her body and into her limbs. Fid sat back into his own grass patch and waved Leva on. Okay, she started again. So you know how Koji went missing? Everyone's saying that he full slipped and fell to the other side of Remani. Yeah, that's what happened to the others too. Fid already knew Leva was about to disagree with him, her elder, the village chief, and the rest of town, just like usual. But I don't get it. He was right. If everyone who full slipped just fell through Remani, why wouldn't they just do it again from the other side of the world and come back? Demonstrating the idea, Leva drove her finger into the dirt, paused, then quickly pulled it back out, made a clicking sound and pointed it to the sky. She looked from her finger to Fid and raised her eyebrows inquisitively. I don't know, maybe they couldn't aim themselves back here? Fid thought of the pickled cream his grand-elder insisted on serving with dinner. Or maybe it's just better over there. Maybe, but there have been dozens of full slip disappearances, Chances are someone would have made it back to Bilia. With that, Fid sat up. All right, let's hear it. A tiny creeping fern, young enough that it didn't know how to avoid Remani cloth, had started to braid vines into Fid's trousers. He gently undid the twists and poked them back into their root ball. Hear what? Your theory and your experiment. I know you already have both. Wait a... Leva didn't have the chance. We've been best friends for 4 killer rests, Leva, he scoffed. You're wasting precious lemon clicks before the rest horn sounds. Let's hear it! Leva grinned and came in close. Okay, so I always thought that the surface of Remani pulls us toward it. She clenched her fist delicately. But when I was trying to catch a Remani worm yesterrest, after I slipped past the ground, the surface wasn't pulling my body anymore. The surface was actually pushing back, as if the pull came from the center of Remani. Even beneath the ground, my head and hands were still being pulled in. Leva finished her sentence with both hands pushed palms out. Okay. Fid could accept this single data point, but he didn't see the connection. What's this have to do with full slips? Isn't it obvious, Fid? Cried Leva, springing up to her feet. If there's something pulling us toward the middle of Remani, the billions who full slipped might not be gone. They might have just made it to the middle. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Leva. Fid tamped his anticipation down. He couldn't be suggesting. Don't worry like that. Huffing, Leva began pacing in a tight circle. My plan isn't just to full slip and try to find them. I think they're stuck, and that'd get us stuck too. Fid gave her a pointed stare, waiting for her to continue. In detail, with safety measures, and a backup plan. Leva paused. Realistically, Fid knew that she didn't actually have a backup plan. Just as they were getting into it, the rest horn sounded. They were far from the center of town where Raigo, the village chief, was blowing it, but the sound resonated through the billion trees across hills and valleys, crystal clear. Only Raigo could produce such a far-sweeping sound. His lungs, like the rest of his body, were strong as rock. The thought of Raigo scolding them for even discussing the middle of Remani lurched forward into Fid's mind. He shook it off and started trotting back. Leva had made him late yesterrest and the rest before. This time, he'd promised Gid that he'd be back 20 lemon clicks after the horn. Leva ran after him, yanking his arm backwards. Look, let's just start with the first portion of the experiment. We're gonna need a super heavy rock and a super long rope. Fid turned at the spot and just stared back. But before that, he prompted. Chapter 3, Experiment. My plan is so simple that it feels outrageous to even document it. But it makes sense. I'll eat and hold as many slip lemons as I possibly can. Then I'll full slip. I believe that when I do, I will fall toward the middle of Remani at an extraordinary speed. This next part is key. Once I get to the center, I will not stop slipping. I'll maintain the full slip until I pop out of the other side of the world. My small concern is that I will end up inside a mountain on the other side and won't pop out at all. That should be fine though. I can just semi-slip my arm free to re-up on lemons and come back. If I unslip at all during the journey, I may not be able to make it all the way home. Woohoo! Got one! Leva paraded around triumphantly. Then, imitating the creature in her palm, she wiggled over to Fid and dumped the prize into his waiting hands. Gross! Fid accepted the worm with a loose grip as it squirmed. Its nose poked between each of his fingers, methodically searching for a path back into the dirt. Billions believe that Remani worms used to live above the surface, but were forced below by some major event. Fid found it interesting that despite their origins above ground, these worms now reached for the home that they had found below. One Remani worm, as promised. Her debts paid, Leva skipped through the dew wheat. Know what this means? Yes, Fid knew. He shucked his pack off and nudged around to reveal a modest jar of dirt, prepared, of course, in anticipation of their success. Now we're ready for the real experiment. Rope. Check. Berry. Big. Rock. Check. Flip lemons. Check. Anything else? That's it, Leva confirmed. Shoes off and stacked, she pried the rope from Fid's clenched hands. And can you walk me through the rope thing again? Obviously you need to slip the rope so that it can move through the ground with you, he said. But when you do that, won't the rope just slip off your foot? Leva began setup. She tied her best slip knot and cinched it down tight, one end around her ankle, the other around the rock. We went over this when I grabbed the worm. I'm going to semi-slip my body and semi-slip the rope. That way, the rope will still be slipped enough to move through the solid ground, but unslipped enough for it to stay on my foot. Leva tugged at the rope for emphasis. And you're completely sure you can semi-slip it. If the rope falls off of you, you won't be able to get back. 100% Fid. Okay, the plan one more Leva didn't wait. She scarfed down a fist-sized lemon and stared intently at the rope, running it between her fingers until the fibers relaxed. Turning to Fid with a two-finger salute, she vanished into the ground. Fid's heart leapt into his throat at her disappearance. A distant corner of his mind recalled that this, a submersion under the surface, was the one thing that could make a slip deadly. He could barely follow the pile of rapidly unraveling rope. The slack was gone in no time, and he watched, entranced, as the rope stretched to all but a thread. He'd picked the right rock. It barely budged. Then, just as Leva had promised, everything appeared to move in reverse. The thread, which seemed more like rubber than anything, squished into itself and rose back into the ground. Awestruck and a little nervous, Fid poked his head over the rising pile of rope. Sure enough, a disheveled and mud-covered Leva barreled out of the ground and smacked right into Fid, who was far too relieved and excited to mind. Fid had slipped his head and torso in anticipation of Leva's exit. This turned out to be an uncharacteristic miscalculation. Once they collided, only then did he realize what happened. Since they both were slipped, they made contact as if neither were. They tumbled onto the ground, but with a quick roll and a gasp of breath, Fid jumped up and started to whoop for joy. It worked! I can't believe it worked! What'd you see? Leva hung her head, not nearly as enthusiastic. Just more dirt and mud. She flicked the rope off of her ankle and leaned to the side, as if confiding in the... Whatever, that was amazing! Fid dismissed her melancholy. You're the first billion to slip all the way into the ground and actually make it back! We have to tell Mev and Gid! Leva snapped her head up, eyes wide, in a rare flicker of panic. No way, Fid! They'll freak out! They might even tell Rygo! We can't tell them until we make it to the middle of Remani. Her tone was both pleading and demanding, and Fid understood Leva's hesitation. What if the elders stopped her? Banned her and Fid from slipping, from finishing their experiment? Fid plopped down beside her. He wouldn't push, not if she was actually worried about it, but he wanted an explanation. Well, Okay, but how are we going to do that? I don't know, Leva admitted. She tucked her legs and chin into her chest and let out a heavy sigh. That was basically all of the rope in Bilia. I didn't get anywhere close. Chapter 4, Newcomer. There is no test or trial run with this plan of mine. It's all or nothing. How do I know whether to go through with it? Ever know? Billion History Pop Quiz. Question 1 was, what is the name of the primary elder of the classmate sitting to your right? How do you know? Fid's primary elder's name is Gid. I know because Fid is my best friend. The teacher crossed out Fid is my best friend and wrote, that may be true, but anyone who knows Fid's name and Bilia's naming convention could figure out his elder's name, just like anyone who knows that you or Leva would know that I am Miva. Why does Remani stay still? Leva wrote, because we are held in place by 3 megasuns, 2 that we can see in our sky and 1 on the other side of the world. How did the early Billions determine that there were 500 lemon clicks in a rest? First, they had to figure out how long a full rest cycle actually took. So they poked a bunch of holes in a huge bucket and filled it up with water. Once they were tired and ready for sleep, they measured how much water had fallen out of the bucket. Then they did the same thing while everyone else rested. Now that they knew how much water would fall out of the bucket during the waking time and the sleeping time of 1 full rest, the last thing was just taking a regular-sized slip lemon and seeing how much water fell out before the lemon wore off. That turned out to be 1/500th of the water from the full rest, which meant that there were about 500 lemon clicks. And the teacher wrote, great answer. The only missing detail is that as water fell out of the bucket, they kept filling it to the same line to keep the force pushing the water out of the bottom consistent. It is semi-slipping, and why is the answer useful for hand fishing? Leva wrote, if you try to catch a fish in your hands normally, it'll feel the water moving when you go for it and swim away. But if you full slip your hand normally, you won't be able to grab the fish at all. So you need something in between. What happens to Billions who decide to full slip? Leva wrote, Rygo says they die, but we've never really confirmed that. We don't know exactly what happens to them. All we know is that full slipping makes your whole body, instead of just part of you, slip through everything. And the teacher crossed all of that out and wrote, see me after class. We were going to test out what happens when you slip a slip lemon, but some of you got cute with the last question. It'll be a lecture instead. Take your seats. The class groaned, grunted, and sat down in a semicircle around their teacher. A few of them ate slip lemons and sank halfway down into the ground in a lounging position. Fid and Leva sat up straight, a bit defiantly, as did Kygo, the village chief's younger. But that wasn't unusual for Kygo. His whole lineage is incredibly strong and equally proud. Never slouch. Number 6 asked, what happens if you decide to full slip? Without warning, the teacher slipped halfway down into the ground, her hips still on their side of Remani and her hands resting impatiently. Is this a full slip? All at once, the class replied, no, Miss Miva. Miva slipped down to her shoulders. How about this? No, Miss Miva. All the way down to her chin now. And this? No. Now, I am not going to slip any further. Why? Silence. Miva let out a gentle sigh. She dropped her underground shoulders, and her concerned eyes met Leva. Leva shifted under the subtle yet pointed attention. If I full slipped, Leva began, and let my head follow the rest of my body into the ground, I'd be gone. You'd never see me again. No response from the class, but no surprise either. All of Bilia would wonder why I chose not to be here anymore, for I surely knew what would happen. Your elders would worry that you would follow me out of example or curiosity, or out of hope to save me. Eva paused once more, looked around the class, pleadingly. There is no saving here. Of the dozens of billions over dozens of kill arrests who full slipped, no one has come back. We haven't found a trace of them. If you full slip, you don't return. With just her head visible, Miva's words seemed to carry more weight. It was an easy scene to picture. Just a slip of the head, and she would be gone. Miva craned her neck to view the 2 megasuns hanging in the billion sky, then looked back down at the class, intently holding eye contact. I'm not trying to scare you all, just to warn you, I know that it can be so tempting to... In a flash, something eclipsed both suns, and a shadow ran across Miva's head. Her awestruck eyes darted back and forth from her students to the sky. The class turned to look and were rewarded with the most peculiar sight. Something was flying toward them. It was too bright in the sky to make out very much about the flying thing, but they could certainly trace its rather large body. The only other flying creatures they'd encountered before were insects. This was 100 times easily the size of a grown billion, and it was barreling toward them. Miva pulled up her arms, pressed her hands against the ground, and rose to her feet. She stood tall and unfazed. The rest of the class rose as well, more timid. The silhouette in the sky broke its free fall and revealed massive wings, tripling its effective size. Its body gracefully rolled back and forth, slicing through the air. Drawing nearer still, it bobbed and weaved through great billion trees with an ostentatious flair, squeezing through unnecessarily small openings and clearly enjoying itself. To everyone's surprise, within eyeshot, the creature looked no different from an average billion. Those wings were certainly something, but upon further inspection, they appeared to be nothing more than a couple of strong, stiff leaves. Heads turned as the creature zipped past the class. Just after passing, its left side ducked down, whipping the creature into a screeching U-turn back to the... Its giant leaf wings flapped twice, sending a brush of dust swirling at the feet of the class. But the figure didn't land. It hung, suspended in the air. Fid would have had to stand on Leva's shoulder to reach the creature's shoes. It met eyes with Miva, and a clear, strange voice rang. "Lovely to see you again, Miva. And you? You must be Leva." The winged newcomer abruptly dropped to the ground, kicking up another poof of dust through the dew wheat, then reached down and grabbed a slip lemon that Fid had dropped in the commotion. Turning to Miva, "I haven't seen one of these in... How long has it been? 4 killer rests?" Bewildered, the whole class turned to Miva. Miva hardly noticed. 5. Certainly took you long enough. Why'd you come? The stranger bounced the slip lemon in one hand. "Mostly because I've been wondering for ages if this would work." With his free hand, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a bright blue fruit, holding it up for everyone to see. He glanced back and forth between the fruits, eventually closing his left fist around the lemon and his right fist around the blue fruit. He flipped over his hands, and after a dramatic pause, let go. The slip lemon hit the ground with a thud, but the blue fruit hung perfectly still in the air, much like he did during his grand entrance. He grinned and looked around as if holding for applause. He got no such thing from Miva, whose stern but slightly contorted face seemed to be holding back a grin of its own. But the class erupted into cheers and awe. "This is a floatberry." The stranger gave the fruit a gentle poke and it glided right toward Leva. "Try it." Without hesitation, Leva scarfed down the floatberry. It had flavor, sweet and tangy, but it was like biting into air. She could taste the fruit but could not feel anything in her mouth. It was bizarre. She swallowed what felt like nothing, wondering if she ate the berry correctly. How can you eat something incorrectly? In less than a lemon click, it became clear that she had not misstepped. She felt the berry move through her body and come to rest on the left side of her stomach. Miva, the newcomer, and the class all watched, wide-eyed, as Leva concentrated all of her energy. The new power started to bubble up inside of her. Leva could feel a peculiar levity beginning to wash over her body, so she jumped into the air and activated everything in her stomach all at once. If you asked her in that moment, Leva would swear she hung at the very tip-top of her jump for a long, long time. In reality, she did not. Leva somehow realized what would happen next, far before anyone else could react. She leapt to her feet and shouted, "Unslip! Leva, unslip now!" As Remani pulled back on Leva back from her jump, she closed her eyes and braced for impact. But force of solid ground did not come, and in an instant, Leva had already slipped down to her shoulders. Her brain, caught between too many inputs, finally processed Miva's shouts. It was too late. Leva's whole body had already slipped beyond the surface. Miva darted over and dove into the ground headfirst with arms outstretched. She slipped as far as she could possibly go with just a toe poking out of the surface. Reaching every inch of her body down into Remani, Miva's semi-slipped hand met Leva's. "Hang tight," Miva cautioned. Her fingers tightened around Leva, heart thumping out of her chest. If you don't slip any further, we can just dig you out. Leva was unfazed, despite the commotion above and beside her. With a shrug, she ignored her elder's suggestion and started climbing up Miva's body, back toward the surface. She slipped through the dirt with ease, while still keeping herself unslipped enough so that she didn't pass through Miva, who looked absolutely stunned. Leva beamed at her elder. Now, with all that semi-slipping right in front of her primary elder, the worm was clearly out of the hand, but Leva still wanted to keep her abilities a secret from the class, at least, so she ended her climb just before the surface. Leva poked her head from the ground, hanging limp as Miva pulled her out like a farmer would a carrot. When all of Leva emerged, Fid tackled her, teary-eyed. I'm fine, squeaked Leva. It wasn't all that different from their experiments, really. Fid, I'm fine. Seriously, you're crushing me. With those assertions of safety, the class let out a collective breath. Whispers became murmurs and hushed cries as the youngers processed Leva's unintentional full slip. And right after their lecture, too. The newcomer was visibly rattled. His eyes skipped between Leva, the unassuming ground, and an increasingly concerned Miva. Sorry about that, kid. I wasn't thinking. Leva looked up at him, hard-eyed over Fid's shoulder. We're trying again tomorrow. Chapter 5. Floating. I've spent enough time floundering. I'm going to do it in 7 rests. I can't wait to tell Rygo. Leva, Fid, and the newcomer, who is called Pava, sat around Miva's breakfast table. So, why is Leva the only one that might be able to use float berries? Fid asked. Miva walked over with 4 glasses and a pitcher of lemon juice, then sat down opposite Fid and Leva before responding. It's a bit complicated, but I suppose it's time we brought you all up to speed. Fid, I'm telling you this because I know Leva will just do it anyways, but I'd like you to keep it between us, okay? Okay. Then a deep breath in. You know that billions have the power of slipping and that we can only slip after eating a slip lemon. Fid and Leva nodded. And you know that in other parts of Remani, there are civilizations whose people cannot slip. Fid interrupted. Is that not just because they don't have slip lemons there to unlock the power? Almost, but no. If someone without the power to slip ate a slip lemon, it wouldn't have an effect. The power has to be passed down through one generation. If an elder eats a slip lemon in the 30 rests between turning 15 kilorests and giving birth to their younger, then that younger will be able to harness the power of a slip lemon. All present billions can slip because our ancestors have eaten slip lemons for ages. Our elders had no power of their own, but by eating slip lemons, they bestowed the ability to slip upon their youngers, who bestowed it upon theirs, and so on. So, you must have eaten a float berry when you were about to have Leva. Yes, Fid. Float berries, and all fruits of Remani, we assume, work the same way. That's where Pava comes in. We met on my one and only journey away from Bilia a long time ago. You left Bilia? Gasped Leva and Fid in unison. Pava had clearly been looking forward to this and jumped at his chance. Yes! How could she become the great teacher she is without going out into the world and first learning from it? Evas are all explorers, right, Maeve? Turning back to the youngers. Meva, and now I, with a dash of pride in his voice, are the only ones who survived the journey between Bilia and where I come from. We met on her way home from the great ascent of the cliffs of Madras. When I found her, she was down to her last lemon, exhausted, frail, on the brink of death. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Pava. She was 5 or 10 rests away from the brink of death, so we got her fed and clothed right away. It was extremely generous. We became good friends. Turning toward Leva, Pava continued. But then your elder turned the rest. Which would be 30 rests after or before I was born. Right. 30 rests to make it back home to Bilia. 30 rests to eat a slip lemon and guarantee slipping abilities. And 30 rests to survive off of the float berries we sent her. The next morning, Leva stepped out of her front door to the most bizarre and spectacular. The airspace in front of her was dense with all sorts of contraptions. Hoops made of contorted branches dangled from the great billion tree. Leva-sized cutouts hung precariously in the sky. Smooth logs connected the peak of one tree to the foot of another. Large sticks stuck out of the ground 10 feet apart. There were vines to swing from, ramps to leap off, posts to balance on. What on Bilia? Said to herself. Pava stood proudly, beaming at what Leva could only assume was his hard work. For your training. He stepped aside and revealed another magnificent surprise. 2 leaves, easily the size of Fid, reinforced with twigs and twine. Palms out, please. He fastened the first leaf to Leva's left arm. He almost toppled over. I can barely hold this up. We'll work on that. Fastening the right leaf. Other than the white, how do they feel? Awkward, but pretty good, I guess. Seems like they fit. Like it. It's been rests, Fid griped. Don't you think you'd be better off letting me watch you on the training course? I can't float, but I bet I could give you some solid pointers. Absolutely not, Fid. You can see me in action once I've got it down. Plus, I don't want you knowing much about the course. Then it'll be more like the real thing when we're floating through it together. Leva and Fid sat together, kicking their feet on a tree branch of respectable height. Yeah, I've been thinking about that. Considering you can't even float yourself through the course right now, I don't feel great about my chances of getting past that exercise unscathed. Putting your best friend in danger isn't particularly best friendly. Can't you bring a big rock or something through the course instead? You know why I can't do that. I need this to be good practice, as close to the real thing as possible. If I'm flying out of Remani with one of the lost billions, they'll be semi-slipping as I float them. So when I practice, whatever I'm carrying needs to simultaneously float and semi-slip. I can only do one of those things at a time to another object, so I need something that can slip itself while we float. Can a rock slip itself, Fid? All right. I'll do it once you're ready, but only if you acknowledge how useful I'm being here. You are being more useful than a rock. Objectively true. I'll take it. Lowering his voice a bit, Fid glanced around. One other thing I've been thinking about. The middle of Remani might not just be stone and dirt. What if you come across evil villain, or find treasure, or run into a pool of lava? Someone say Pava? Leva and Fid jumped, reflexively catching themselves against nearby tree fronds. Pava popped out from around the trunk and struck a pose. I know I'm fascinating, but you youngers shouldn't be talking about me all the time. Of course, I don't mind. In unison, no one said Pava. A few rests later, Leva showed up to class positively beaming. Fid knew exactly what that smile was about. Dread and excitement danced through him, and he fought the urge to squirm into a sitting position. The session's lecture explained why slip lemons have no distinct taste. Fid couldn't understand how Miva managed to turn that topic into a 60 lemon click long diatribe, and he certainly wasn't interested in it. But he wasn't in a position to argue about curriculum, and the lecture was keeping a certain someone equally trapped, so he kept his face pointed straight ahead at Miva. Leva's gaze was crackling the back of his head, burning him with excitement. Face forward, he told himself. The trick was not to make eye contact. No matter what you say, I'm not ready for you to sling me through that death trap. So, class, if you're ever feeling spiteful about the tasteless slip lemon, just remember that you have your ancestors and their sensitive palates to blame for tossing away the sour ones. We think tasteless lemons are better for slipping anyways. Taking a deep breath, Fid closed his eyes and held still as the rest of the class packed up. Predictably, Leva did the opposite. She leapt from the ground, swept up Fid by the armpits, and made for the training course with him. This was relatively typical behavior for Leva and Fid once class ended. Leva didn't bat an eye. Leva, I'm not ready! Fid jostled back and forth with Leva's pace. But I am, Leva shot back, slightly out of breath. Which means you are. Don't you trust me? Okay, great. Pava went looking for materials to make new wings for himself. He says the old ones aren't positively beautiful. As she spoke and ran, Leva's voice rose in a crescendo. And Miva has to pack up after class, so she won't be back for another 15 lemon clicks. He released Fid with a flourish, their combined momentum sending both into a whirl. Nearby tufts of dew wheat swished merrily as Fid stumbled, then caught himself. This is the perfect time! Leva shouted, triumphant. Before Fid could protest any further, Leva scarfed down a few float berries. She grabbed hold of his arm and floated both Fid's body and her own. Fid expected the feeling of floating to be just like slipping, but the two were quite different. Slipping feels like your body and mind are separated. There's a kind of absence of sensation entirely. The mind tells the body what to do, the body obeys, but it doesn't receive feedback from the world it's interacting with to confirm that it is indeed following orders correctly. The only thing that the body still feels is the force of Remani continuing to pull it down. But as Fid started to float with Leva, he felt Remani set them free. Floating, on the other hand, is weightlessness. The body can still feel, but it is free from the shackles of gravity. In fact, it feels more. It can move more quickly, more smoothly than its old self. Your first float is like trudging through quicksand all your life, and then suddenly you're on solid ground. Giddiness superseded reluctance, and Fid popped a lemon to semi-slip his whole body. Leva wasn't the only younger in Bilia who could semi-slip these. Fid felt quite good about that. The skill clicked for him a couple rests ago after imagining semi-slipping as elongating the state the body is in during the final moments before a slip wears off, just between slipping and unslipping. Get on! Leva fastened her weight faster than Fid could process his floating experience. Fid did as he was told. He had a lot more to ponder, but this moment was for doing, not thinking. In no time, they were off. The two of them soared into the sky, certainly the youngest, perhaps the only, Bilians to float and slip at the same time. Where are you going? Fid yipped. The first obstacle is down there. That can wait a second. I want to show you something. Leva took Fid higher. First, the suns poked through broad leaves, then the tree line fell away, and in barely a click, they burst into the sky. Everything that Fid took in was brand new. Of course, he was aware that due north, water stretched as far as the eye could see. He knew that roofs of all of Bilian houses were bright yellow. He'd been told that the canopies of Bilian trees were as thick as clouds, but how could he possibly have imagined what it would all look like from up here? It was spectacular. Then, it was over with. Suddenly, Leva tucked in her wings and nosedived toward the first obstacle. Yelling back, "You ready?" Tears flew off the side of his face from the wind. Fid gulped and gave her a pinch. Yes. Having gained great speed, the two of them zipped through the first hoop. Leva tucked her left shoulder down, inching them over, and they whizzed through the next. Then a hoop to the right and left, and back to the center with a snap. Then she flapped her wings twice, slowing them enough to kick off a nearby trunk with her left foot. With each pivot, Fid focused on keeping his center of mass in line with Leva's, no matter how she twisted. Leva glided for a moment, then grabbed a branch above them and flung them in a loop-de-loop around it. Still with a bit of speed, the two of them squeezed straight down through a hole no wider than their shoulders, right under the branch. With a two-footed kick, Leva sent them speeding backwards off another well-placed tree. Straight ahead, 10 hoops formed a kind of tunnel, each smaller and slightly lower than the previous one. Leva and Fid spun through each hoop with ease and popped out over a slick log that laid slanting down. Flaring her wings, Leva cut their speed once again. She landed sideways on the log, and, keeping her weight, or lack thereof, forward and low, she and Fid started sliding down. They leaned against the log through twists and turns, picking up significantly more speed, even more than moments ago. Leva steered them with her wings as the log dipped down precipitously, went flat, then rose back up at the same angle, launching the two of them into the air once again. Extending her arm, Leva snatched hold of a vine, and she and Fid swung counterclockwise around the tree in front of them and ended up facing back the way they came. She let go, grabbed hold of another vine, and then, in a rhythm, swung from another. Another. At last, Leva launched herself from the final vine, cut speed, and landed gracefully upon an upright post that marked their finish line. Balanced on the post, Fid took a deep breath in. His moment of peace did not last long, though, as Leva wasted no time before slinging him along for a victory lap. For another short while, they flew gracefully, and later, gently, soared around the forest and back to the house. With little ceremony, Fid dismounted and held his head in his hands. Leva chattered out from all her victory hoots and hollers, looked at Fid expectantly. No answer. Then, concerned, "Fid, are you hurt?" Fid looked up at her, then, pale as a ghost. He swayed a bit and vomited explosively all over Leva's feet and the shrubs of their landing pad. Slowly, he picked his head up and wiped his mouth. calm. Leva, that may have been the best lemon click of my life. I think you're ready. Chapter 6. Preparations. Reluctance I can understand, but his counter-arguments have lost all logic. There's some other danger he knows of that I do not? If so, why keep it from me? I can't make any sense of it. Okay, Leva, you're leaving in 3 rests. Let's make sure you have what you need, said Fid, studying his notepad. Slip lemons? Started down the list and waited for Leva's affirmative. Can we not do the check thing, Fid? He whined back, sounding a little distracted. I'm nervous and just want to talk through everything. Muttering to himself. Feeling. Check. Leva relaxed a bit and immediately backpedaled. I'm sorry. You make the best lists and you're the most organized best friend I could ask for. I know this keeps us safe. All right, Fid humped back. If you get it, then of course, I forgive you. But you're right. Let's get to it. Your wingsuit is all patched up and you're floating better than ever. You have 20 massive slip lemons and float berries. That should be more than enough. But what's the rule for turning back? Half plus 1. Right. If you ever get down to 11 of either of those, immediately turn. No messing around and pushing it to 10, by the way, Fid said. You need to have more than half for the trip back, just in case. The fruit should tide over your thirst, and for hunger and extra energy, you have 5 rests of rations in Bilia bars if you need them. Same rule there, half plus 1. You've got a knife for general survival stuff. And for stabbing whatever evil person I find down there, who seemed like she was paying considerably more attention than you. Fid paused, and Leva was surprised to see him legitimately considering this. Yes, and for self-defense and potential stabbing. You've got rope, though I don't know how much you'll need it, and you've got spare leaves from great billion trees, which you can use if you need to and patch. They both sat quietly for a few minutes. Then Leva muttered, almost to herself, why didn't they leave notes? Ooh. Flipped through his notebook rather conspicuously. The full slippers. If I was going to try it, I'd tell you, or leave a note for Miva saying goodbye, or dig me out if I'm not back in a rest or something. Leva paused, remembering that she and Fid were quite literally preparing for Leva's slip, and that she wasn't planning to leave a note for her elder. Well, maybe not exactly, but I wouldn't just go for it without saying anything. Leva could see the gears turning in Fid's head. It was weird that the full slippers just up and left. It could be that the billions who got a note just didn't share it, he posited. You know how Miva gets if we even mention a full. I guess that's true. Maybe we just weren't the people getting the notes. That made enough sense, but Leva wasn't fully satisfied. Neither was Fid, she suspected, but it wouldn't do them any good to investigate that right now. He had something more pressing to share. On the subject of notes, I have something for you. Leva pulled out an envelope and handed it to Fid, turned it over in his hands, and read it out loud. Leva, your eyes only. Without hesitation, he opened the envelope and pulled out a bright orange piece of paper. It read, It is no secret that your slipping skills are improving at an exceptional rate. Your natural talent should not be ignored. With it, we may have a chance to solve the mystery behind it. If you have questions, I can give you some answers. Mustn't speak of this. Both of ours. You surely know that the consequences of slipping too far down this path without a certain prudence. Tomorrow at the Billy Tree, 100 lemon clicks before the rest horn. Bring this note. Well, said Fid, at least you're in the clear because you didn't technically speak of this to anyone else. Go? Yep. What if it's a trap? You'll be nearby. I sure will. Fid nodded. The matter of the note and what to do about it was closed with. When Leva approached the Billy Tree the following morning, the billions sitting under it could not have come as more of a surprise. The Billy Tree, known as the Grand Elder of all billion trees, is, by all accounts, the oldest living thing in Bilia. It sits in the base of a valley, but stretches far higher than all of its surrounding descendants by hills. Its waist is also quite massive. Leva actually measured it once, 12 and a half hugs around. A typical billion looked no more than a speck standing under the Billy Tree, but not Rygo. Rygo, The village chief was strong in all senses of the word. Physically, his frame boasted massive, towering height, thick limbs to match. In the annual Limb Olympics, no Bilian has ever come close to topping Rygo. His lemon toss was typically 3 times farther and faster than the next best, and had respectable accuracy. Anyone unfortunate enough to face him in the lemon ball tournament always came back riddled with numb spots all over their body from slip lemons exploding behind the force of Rygo's throws. He was a strong leader, too. He used fear to command respect, and his decisions proceeded without question, except perhaps by youngers who did not yet know better. In much the same way, Rygo also held strong convictions. He was more certain than anyone else that full slipping was reckless, selfish, and foolish. All the reason why it was such a shock to see him sitting under the billy tree. For a moment, Leva considered whether he was there by coincidence, but shook her head. This would be an absurd time to be awake at all, let alone lingering beside their most honored elder tree. She stepped forward. As Leva came near, Rygo stood up, and when he did, Leva mused that if he held still, his enormous body could pass for a billion tree itself. "Come with me," Rygo rumbled, straight down to business. "I have much to tell you." Rygo led Leva through the woods to his home, which sat upon a massive tangerine-colored boulder. He approached the door, turned back toward Leva, and made a shushing gesture. "If Kygo is asleep upstairs, why would he bring me here to talk?" But she was too wrapped up in her surprise to whisper the question aloud. They walked straight through the house and down the stairs to a long, cone-shaped basement that looked around 2 feet wide at the entrance, 50 feet wide at the end. Peering around, she saw that there wasn't much to Rygo's cave-like unfinished basement, except a massive rock that sat at the back of the room. "Okay." He said nothing else. "Rygo, why are we here?" "Because I have something to show you. And for that, we needed to be somewhere tucked away. But first things first," he grunted. "Did you bring the note?" Leva dutifully handed it over. Rygo studied it, ripped it in half, and stuffed the shreds in his pocket. At Leva's curious look, he chuckled. She couldn't tell what was so funny. "Sorry, but if it came to light that I wrote this, there would be an uproar in Bilia. You can never be too careful." Rygo was certainly careful. Every 30 lemon clicks on the night before Leva met him at the billy tree, he surveyed the entire area, presumably checking for a friend of Leva's who might be camped out nearby. Luckily, one particular friend of Leva's was even more careful. Fid had crept down to the valley on the rest before and found a remarkable hiding spot, inside the billy tree itself. Leva thanked their ancestors for evolving out of the need to breathe a long time ago. That would have made Fid's hiding spot much more complicated. Leva knew that the only thing Fid brought with him was a thin, hollow pole with a clamp on one side, which he named the Extendo. The Extendo was a brilliant little creation that functioned as a listening device, communication tool, and a means for simple evacuation. By way of adjustable tube, Fid could eavesdrop on Rygo and Leva deceptively close beside them, and, if he felt the need to do so, pull deep, calming breaths of air into his body, which was conjoined with the inside of the tree. When the time came to exit, Fid could simply expand the Extendo's clamp against the billy tree and pull himself out. Rygo's air of cautiousness did put Leva on edge, but she held one small, somewhat smug conviction. She wasn't sure what Rygo needed to show her or why it was a secret even from Kygo, but she knew that Fid had been right beside her at the meeting, that he heard Rygo's voice a few lemon clicks ago, and that he dashed to catch up and follow them right through the door of the Igo house. Leva's curiosity almost never gave in to anxiety, and this would be no exception. After all, she had Fid as a backup. "What is it you want to show me?" Leva asked. Without a word, Rygo turned away from her and rolled the giant rock over, revealing a small passage and a new area. This room was much more interesting. The first thing Leva noticed was a smattering of maybe a dozen X's on the ground. Scanning up, she found all manner of drawings pinned to the walls. Some were labeled: Hypotheses for the Remani core, Semi-slip trial number 3, Unknown fruits? "Whose are these? They aren't in your handwriting," Leva asked. She walked one way, then another, traced a pattern of X's, and finally settled by a cluster of botanical diagrams. Moments passed in silence, and Leva began to rifle through a pile of notes. "Very astute, Leva," said Rygo. If she had been less distracted by the room itself, Leva might have noticed that Rygo was much less aloof than usual. His tone was warm, almost gentle. "These belong to one of the most brilliant Bilian minds of our lifetime. Surely you've heard of Kua." "Miva's mentioned her in class, but I don't know much." Leva turned back to Rygo, rolling her eyes and making air quotes. "Curious Kua, another Bilian, a close friend of my elders, who full slipped and was never seen again." Rygo met her answer with a small shake of his head. "What you don't know is that Kua should have been chief instead of me." Surprise set Leva's mind awhirl with questions, but Rygo did not pause this time. "We built Bilia up together. She the brains, I the brawn. She was inquisitive, passionate, and of course, hell-bent on solving the mystery of what Remani holds in its center. More than anything, though, she was revered by all." Rygo took a step toward Leva. "When she disappeared, Bilians finally abandoned the notion that we should look for answers inside Remani," he said, voice incrementally more forceful. The soft stone absorbed small echoes, and Rygo sounded solid and sure. "Full slipping was no longer worth the risk, for surely if the magnificent Kua could not find a way to survive it, no one could. After all this happened, Bilians looked to me for answers. Of course, I desperately wanted to continue Kua's search," Rygo offered a shrug. "But I was already known as the pragmatist, the one who knew how to make us use what we had, not go searching for more. So," he took another pointed step toward Leva, "I denounced full slipping in order to build stability and consensus in Bilia." Hearing that, Leva leapt to her feet in protest. Abandoning her exploration with a ruffle of paper. "But how could you abandon Kua's work? There's so much here." "That's just it," interrupted Rygo. "I haven't abandoned it." He waved a hefty arm beside Leva, gesturing around at the pages and pages of careful handwriting. "This place is a tribute to Kua, and Leva, I need your help to honor it." Rygo looked at her with encouragement, then seemed suddenly to burn with conviction. "I want to show you something more. Please, sit." Elders can be such cowards, thought Leva. She was wholly impressed by Rygo. What was stability worth if it kept you from the truth of the world? Nonetheless, she took a seat on the floor by a smattering of X's. Rygo knelt down beside her. "Okay, Leva. Before I show you this, I need to make sure. You didn't show the note to anyone?" "Right." "And you told no one about it?" "I did not," said Leva, confident in their loophole. "Nor did you tell anyone where you were off to this morning?" "Right," she lied. "Very good," Rygo nodded. "I'm sorry to belabor, but as I mentioned, you can never be too careful. On to better questions." He looked directly at Leva. "You feel the same drive for answers that Kua felt, am I right?" "Yes." "And surely you've made some attempts to break the surface of Remani," Rygo continued, his expression implied into the answer. She had seen it on Miva's face countless times. Leva hesitated, and nervous energy bubbled up in her stomach. "Why are you asking all of this?" she returned, avoiding the question. Rygo sighed and turned slightly away. "I just need to make sure that you are prepared, ideologically and perhaps physically. I'm not going to get you into trouble, so let's try again," he growled. "You have, or you're not ready?" "Yes," admitted Leva. "I've tried to go into Remani, but I haven't made it that far." "How far?" Rygo prodded. Leva wondered how Fid would answer. She opted to dodge the question with a true story. "Last week in class, I was trying to use the new fruit that this newcomer, Pava, brought, and I accidentally burned my lemon reserves and full slipped. It took me a second to realize, and when I unslipped, I was already a few feet underground. It wasn't a big deal. Miva pulled me out." Leva shrugged. "I want to go farther, though." "Yes, of course you do," Rygo agreed. "This is quite helpful. One last question. Semi-slipping. The youngest Bilian to do it was twice your age, but since you've been learning so fast, I have to ask, are you able to semi-slip?" It was not a conscious choice, but instinctively, Leva lied. No, I can't. Rygo let out a calm sigh, and his demeanor changed from kind to sinister. Good. In a flash, Rygo placed both hands on Leva's shoulders and pressed down with an incredible amount of force. She felt the ground sway and disappear under her as Rygo compelled her to slip and disappear into the basement floor. Leva was stuck underground. Her first thought was to semi-slip and crawl back out, but she had just told Rygo that she couldn't. How long would he stay? What would Rygo do if she emerged right away? Her body was still, but Leva could hear blood rushing in her ears and feel knots of confusion and terror tangling up her spine. Rygo put her in the ground. After a few heart-pounding moments, Leva heard the scratching of a line of chalk on the ground above her, and one more after that. Next came footsteps that faded away, and the muffled sound of a large rock rolling back, to block the room, presumably. Gradually, after Rygo walked away, Leva calmed and pieced it together. Had she actually been unable to semi-slip, she would be completely stuck. Someone in her position would only have two choices: slowly starve to death or full slip into the middle of Remani. A tendril of excitement built amidst the fear. I need to give it some time before I get out of here. Leva waited about 100 lemon clicks, then decided it had been long enough. Steeling herself, she started to worm her way back to the surface. Crawling to the ground like this without the help of something like a rope or Fid's extendo isn't easy. With the tool, you can heave toward whatever anchors it and pull yourself out. Without it, it feels like swimming up through quicksand. After a few lemon clicks of hard work, Leva popped her last appendage out of the ground and rolled over on her back, collecting herself. With a start, Leva glanced back to the spot that she came from and saw it, a freshly chalked X, identical to the others in the room except for some smudging, proof of her recent exit. Leva felt sick. This time, she counted 14 X's. Leva's next obstacle was the giant rock standing between her and the stairs out of the I Go Home. She tested the boulder, pushing hard. Perhaps predictably, it didn't move an inch. Suddenly furious, Leva took 10 steps back, ran at the rock, and slammed herself against it. Still nothing, and now her shoulder hurt a little. But it did give her a better idea. Again, she took 10 steps back and ran at the rock, but this time she jumped into the air right before making contact and full slipped. Making almost no sound at all, Leva soared straight through the rock, unslipping after clearing it, and hit the ground on the other side in a barrel roll. With a cool brush of tangerine clay off her shoulders, she wished in dismay that someone else had seen that. Though she was pretty confident that Rygo and his younger would be out of the house by now, Leva tiptoed up the basement all the same. The door of the main floor creaked pitifully when she peered out from the top of the stairs. Phew. Once she could finally see the front door, Leva abandoned stealth completely and ran for it, bursting outside to freedom. No time to waste now. She needed to find Fid and Miva right away. Chapter 7, Confrontation. There wasn't some unknown danger. He was the danger. Now I am stuck here, a prisoner of the pocket of this world that I so desperately wanted to find. I don't know why Rygo did this. If I survive long enough down here off of these strange orange fruits, I should think the answer will reveal itself. Leva ran as fast as she could back to Fid's emergency meeting spot, the valley where they caught their first Remani worm. As Leva crested the hill and looked down, Fid came into view, pacing. Leva caught her breath and shouted through a grin, "Hey! Something on your mind?" Fid whirled around. "Where have you been?" I'll catch you up on the way back to the house. We need to find Miva and Pava right now." As they hurried back, Leva filled Fid in on Rygo's secret and his attempt at silencing her forever. "The best part is we have proof. We just need to show Miva and Pava and Rygo, and Rygo will be done for. You said you already talked to Miva? When was that?" "About 50 lemon clicks ago. I just told her that you went into Rygo's house and he came out without you. She said she'd talk it over with Pava." "And so she did." Pava swooped out of the trees, showy as ever. "So you weren't kidnapped by the village chief after all? Or, let me guess, you escaped using your legendary slipping abilities." Leva ignored his sarcasm, which ironically described exactly what happened, and asked, "Where's my elder? I need to talk to her right—" "Slow down."
She should be back any moment now. After Mr. Undercover, gesturing to Fid, brought us up to speed, Miva decided to go ahead and ask the Bilian himself what happened. Who? What do you mean who? Your kidnapper, of course. The one in charge. Rygo. A wave of anxiety washed over Leva. We have to go. Miva might be in danger. But just as she started toward the door, it opened, and Miva walked through. When her eyes met Leva, her demeanor changed from worry to relief to frustration, all in a moment. Ah, my kidnapped younger. Back at home. Miva, you have to listen to me. Please listen. Yours and Fid's stunt just made me look the complete fool in front of the most powerful Bilian in the village. I'm sure you would have another fantastical tale to tell me. So what is it this time? How did you escape from your kidnapper? Leva had never seen her elder this way. Stammering, well, what happened is, go on. And Leva told everything to Miva, whose expression was virtually blank. You have to trust me. I'll prove it. I can prove it. Let's go to Rygo's now, before he has time to destroy the evidence. Leva expected protest, but instead got resignation. Miva sighed. Okay, Leva, we can go, and you can show me. But if there's nothing there, will you drop this and your obsession with the center of Remani once and for all? Leva looked at Fid, who nodded. Yes. So the four of them, Leva, Miva, Pava, and Fid, trudged up the hill to Rygo's. Leva's palms started to sweat when the giant bright orange boulder came into view. Okay, everyone, she said. You need to be on your guard. When Rygo sees me, who knows what he'll do? He might attack us all on sight, or make a run for it, or something else entirely. Be ready for anything. Pava puffed out his chest. Fid's grip tightened and knuckles whitened around his eavesdropping extendo, which was apparently also a weapon. Miva looked relaxed. Leva anxious. She knocked. Rygo opened the door coolly. He saw Leva, made a grandiose gesture, and in the same jeering tone that Pava and Miva had used, he said, Ah, so you've escaped. Fid looked concerned, and Leva had a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. Why wasn't Rygo shocked to see me standing in front of him? He must be exploding inside. Let me guess. You've come to take a look around, to show the elders here my evil lair that I trapped you in. Let's get on with it, then. Eva stepped forward. Rygo, I'm really sorry about this. They told me if I gave them this, that they would finally let it go. Rygo looked at her with kind, assuring eyes. Miva, it's perfectly okay. Youngers ought to dream for a while. I don't mind allowing them a chance to get it out of their systems. Drop the act, Rygo, said Leva. We've got you. She pushed past him, marched down the stairs into the basement, and led the group to the giant rock standing between them and the secret room from which she had escaped not 100 lemon clicks ago. Go ahead, Rygo. Move the rock. Well, while I can exert a modest amount of force, I surely can't move something like that. Leva cocked her head. Fine. Smugly, she took 10 steps back, ran toward the rock yet again, and full slipped as she threw herself at it. Leva! They all shouted at once. After she had cleared the rock, she unslipped, anticipating a fall and a barrel roll on the other side, but she experienced something else entirely different. She was immediately and entirely stopped in her tracks. Pain hit her body all at once, as she had effectively run full speed into a wall. On the other side, Miva's lower half stayed planted firm in the basement room, and her upper half extended out through the hard rock to give Leva a hand. Leva grabbed it, semi-slipped, and crawled back out. Shaking her head, I don't understand. There was another room on the other side of the rock earlier. At the same time, Miva checked Rygo's expression, which was flat and unsurprised, and she raised an eyebrow. Fid, I bet we can still get in the room if we look a bit further. Can you check? Fid pulled out his extendo pole device and revealed yet another feature, lengthening it to about 15 feet. This would be enough, right? Yes, definitely. Fid semi-slipped the telescoping extendo. He pushed it into the rock, and Rygo interrupted him. You can semi-slip too? Then, as if catching himself, you too can semi-slip? Miva looked pensive. Rygo continued. Impressive, Leva and Fid. I might not have believed semi-slipping possible at your age if I hadn't confirmed for myself in this very corridor. The pit in Leva's stomach grew. So that's why he wasn't surprised to see me. He already knew I had escaped, Ever since he spoke with Miva about 60 lemon clicks ago. He probably went to my ex on the ground and checked for me below the surface. And when I was gone, he would have realized I semi-slipped and escaped. But still, there's no way he would have had enough time to cover everything up. Fid slid the pole into the wall as far as it could go and looked through the hole. Leva, I just see more rock. What? No, that's impossible. Let me check. Sure enough, there was nothing to be seen peering through the pole. This doesn't make any sense. It was here. Let's try another spot. Leva. What, Fid? He went quiet. Rygo broke the silence. Maybe I can help. Leva, why don't you tell us exactly what happened earlier? Snarling. You entrapped me! You tried to kill me! Patronizingly. Tell us in detail, Leva. You wrote me a note on a bright orange paper, the same color as the rock outside. You told me to meet you at the billy tree 100 lemon clicks before the rest horn. Evidence. Perfect. Surely you still have that note. You made me give it to you, and you ripped it up. So that piece of evidence was quite conveniently destroyed. Very clever of me. Leva was fuming. Rygo continued. Well, what about this? Did you tell anyone where you were off to this morning? You told me not to in the note. The note again. Right then. I told Fid, and he followed us and saw the whole thing. Fid nodded. Rygo raised an eyebrow. The only one you told was your best friend, Fid? I'm sure you can appreciate that he is not the most unbiased witness. What about any elders? Miva? Pava? Leva gritted her teeth and shook her head no. My turn for a question, then. Where were you this morning, Rygo? Tell us, if you've done nothing wrong. Well, I was, just as you have said, here in my home. What billion would not be at that time? I was fast asleep. No, you weren't! You were with me! You've killed every billion that ever dug too deep into the secrets of the middle of Remani, and you tried to kill me! Enough! Miva interrupted. She pleaded. Leva, in the middle of Remani, there's only pain and death. Rygo, thank you for letting us into your home. I think at this point, this has gone far enough. Rygo had won them over, and he had inexplicably covered everything up in a matter of lemon clicks. Leva was absolutely crushed, but never broken. She cast an unwavering look over to Fid, who knew exactly what it meant. Leva was not going to stop until her questions were answered, and there was only one place to find those answers. It was finally time to go. Leva stomped her way home at a ridiculous walking pace. Fid and Miva jogged alongside her, and Pava floated forward just to keep up. Miva tried to block the way. Leva, I want to talk about... Leva brushed Miva aside and sent her elder a glare that could pierce a diamond. Leva, listen to me. Leva sidestepped her elder again, who moved back in front. They were almost dancing. Leva, I need you to give me a chance to explain my... Why would I? Why wouldn't... When you wouldn't give me the same thing? Leva, if you would just let me... You're supposed to be there for me. You're supposed to trust me. To believe me. I do! Leva finally let up for a moment. Miva went on. I believe you. Every word. I just couldn't let Rygo think I did. Leva shuddered with fear. Just hearing his name jerked her out of this moment and back into Rygo's inexplicably hidden prison. Then Miva pulled her younger close, tears in her eyes. Oh, Leva, you must have been so scared. Choking back tears of her own, Leva tried to muster up a courageous reply, but nothing came out. The fear and shock of what she had just went through not 200 lemon clicks before finally caught up to her, and she wept as her elder held her close. Fid and Pava shared their own, less familiar embrace. Pava patted Fid awkwardly. But why do you believe me? Rygo covered the whole thing up. Leva, you are a dreamer, but not a liar. I suspect that Rygo's lies, on the other hand, go back to before you were even born. I put it together when you semi-slipped, and he didn't bat an eye. No one except the four of us know that you can semi-slip. You're the youngest to ever do it by far. It should have shocked him, unless he had already confirmed that you could semi-slip for himself. Fid jumped in. And then he gawked at my semi-slip right after that. Miva nodded. That confirmed it for me, clasping her hands together. So we need to leave for the center of Remani as soon as possible. Pava and I will float and semi-slip together and see if there are survivors. You and Fid can stay back. Leva considered this for a moment, but shook her head no. I'm the only one who can go. Out of the question. I will not let you risk your life at just 5.5 killer rests. Miva, think about it. If you suddenly disappear, Rygo will know something is up. We should keep him thinking that you lost my trust. There's more that he's hiding. If we're going to bring him down, we need to figure out his secret and spring a trap on him before he even knows we're onto him. If the answer is anywhere, it's in Remani. I'll go then, said Fid. His voice shook a little, but he was serious, determined. I'll semi-slip you, and you'll float me, just like we've been practicing. Leva shook her head again. And what would we tell poor Gid when he asks why his younger is missing? Miva jumped back to volunteer her old friend. Pava can join you then. You'll just flip roles so that he floats you while you semi-slip him. Plus, he's an outsider. It wouldn't be strange for him to disappear and go back home. The problem is I can't semi-slip Pava. He's way too big. Pava looked a little relieved. Leva thought about how the same rule applied, not just to slipping, but to floating too. If she did find billions down there, she could only fully float those smaller than she when it came time to bring them home. That was a bridge to cross if she came to it. Fid cut in. Wait a second. Why do we move on from me? Sparing my elder the worry isn't a good enough reason for you to go at this alone. I'm going. A bit more protesting from the Evas ensued, but eventually the group acquiesced. The elders would stay on the surface and feign ignorance, while the youngers, who were the only ones bold, clever, and curious enough to start peeling back the layers of this mystery in the first place, would go. Fid had already packed his bag rests ago.
Chapter 8, Into Remani. I foraged the last piece of orange fruit. At this point, I certainly don't expect to be found. Surely Rygo has told the whole village that I went mad and full-slipped into Remani, never to return. The climb back to the surface is too far. My only option now is in. If this is my final act, at least it will be one of discovery. I just hope I have enough reserves to make it all the way to the core. Leva kicked off the ground and soared into the air. Her co-pilot, Fid, was attached to her at the hip. He wore goggles and a helmet, and, to Leva's surprise, he looked perfectly at ease. She smirked as they flew upward. She knew that no one, neither Fid nor the elders watching anxiously, were questioning why she was flying the wrong direction. Remani is down, but this was a big moment. It deserved a bit of a spectacle. Fid had done his checks earlier. Fid had put on his makeup. Fid had done his checks earlier and made preparations. They packed all the same gear as they had the last time Leva prepared for the journey, plus Fid's extendo and a sealed note from Miva that read, "For when you're stuck." Leva and Fid rose farther until they reached the high canopies of the great Bilian trees. This had become Leva's favorite spot. They hung there for a moment, and all was still. The megasuns affixed in the sky as usual, burning hot. The trees quiet in the absence of wind, holding their breath. The two youngers doing the same. In the silence, Leva considered the frightening truth that this could be the last time they saw their home. Love you, buddy. Fid reciprocated with a squeeze. Then a deep breath and an unfloat from Leva, and a subsequent hunkering down from Fid, and they torpedoed back to the surface. They bobbed and weaved through branches, soaring carefree through obstacles that Leva only first conquered 10 rests ago. Miva and Pava smiled as the youngers hurled toward them. They smiled back, wider. Then, in a violent blink, Leva and Fid broke the surface and were into Remani. On the elders' side of the world, all was still, except for the leaves that twirled in a waltz down from the trees. Below the crust of Remani, it was dark, of course. Fid had outfitted the extendo with a light. Functionally, it did not serve them very much, since it was pointed directly into solid ground, but it did manage to light up their faces, a small comfort in this abyss of rock. They flew for a short time, and then a vast cave opened up. Whoa. The floor of the cave and some of the walls had a remarkable blood-orange hue, and the same shade as the boulder that stood outside Rygo's house. The bright rock emitted light, and Fid put away his extendo. Should we look around? Fid nodded. They covered serious ground in the air, surveying the area for exciting clues. What they found was much worse. They turned the corner and saw it. Saw him. The boy, their age, who had disappeared some 50 rests ago, lay face down on the bright orange rock. Fid and Leva glided gently toward the boy. His name had been Koji. Fid touched Koji's face with the back of his hand and felt nothing but cold. He looked up at Leva and shook his head, tears in his eyes. Choking back tears of her own, Leva hypothesized. His legs look broken, and look. She gestured to a set of bones a few feet away. I bet Rygo slipped them below the surface like he did with me. Then, since they couldn't semi-slip to crawl out, all they could do was full slip into this cave. But they would have been falling so fast by the time that they got here that when they unslipped... She trailed off. The thought of this boy's brutal crash too much to bear. The two briefly considered what to do next. They could go back and report this to the group, float up into what was likely Rygo's lair, or they could press on. Ultimately, Koji's fate didn't change that much for them. Rygo still had plausible deniability and far more trust than Leva and Fid, and the Bilians trapped farther in might need their help, urgently. But first, Fid noticed something. Hey, check this out. Holding up what looked like an orange slip lemon. Have you ever seen something like this before? Leva shook her head. Fid turned it over in his hands, shrugged, and started peeling. The color of the flesh beneath matched the orange of the peel, and as he ripped it open, he noted how this fruit smelled sweeter than a lemon, but sharper than a berry. It certainly looked more lemonish, and he wondered if eating it would do the same thing as eating a slip lemon did. Leva wondered the same, and held out her hand expectantly. Nope, we can't eat this. There's a process for safe foraging. First, we're supposed to smell it for foul odors. Done. It smells great. Then we're supposed to put it on our skin for one rest. A whole rest? Yes, we need to make sure we don't have a reaction. After that, we can... Forget it. We don't have time for all that. Fid seemed to consider this and decided that it was true. He stuffed the orange fruit into his pocket and gave a nod that he was ready to get back to it. The two friends stood back up and made to resume their journey inward. With a grunt, Fid hopped back onto Leva's hip harness that he had designed so as not to interfere with her floating. He popped his first spare lemon and Leva her first spare berry. Leva double-checked her huge wings and shook her shoulders back and forth to get her gear situated properly. Then she took 2 steps, leapt off of her left foot into the air, and dove into the orange pool below. This layer of rock, solid orange, was far more pleasant to navigate. Leva and Fid could actually see a bit because of the mysterious luminescence it gave off. It was truly a vast expanse of orange, though every so often they would notice the occasional opaque whitish rock. It reminded Leva of the wisps of cloud that you could find tucked in the sky between the suns at home, but only if you really squinted for it. Leva noticed a few creatures that she had never seen before. The closest living thing she could compare them to were Remani worms, but that wasn't quite right. These things were thicker, about the size of her forearm, and see-through. A sort of hinge bisected their bodies, and they seemed to move by splitting in half and then closing back up quickly enough to propel themselves forward. Leva and Fid re-upped on their respective fruits again, though Leva was barely applying any float to them since the pull from the core was actually helping them get where they needed to go. Shortly after, the orange that surrounded them started growing brighter yet, and Leva hoped that this would signal a change in scenery. She could feel the force of Remani starting to waver, and Leva, a bit impatient, went into a tuck to reduce drag. In response, Fid adjusted his semi-slip accordingly so that they were closer to slipped than unslipped. Together, these adjustments more than doubled their speed, and they were rewarded with something new. At their speed, it only lasted a moment. There was another huge cave, or gap, in the rock. They shot through the blank space in an instant, but they had enough time to make out 2 words written on the ground in bright orange. Keep slipping. Leva and Fid exchanged nods and did as the message instructed. They were now hurtling through a new chunk of rock. This section was grainy and red, and it had an almost palpable energy to it. They moved faster and faster. The grains in the rock bled into long streaks as they soared further inward. The actual tug from the center was much less now, but all Leva could think about was how much speed they had gained. Leva wondered if Fid might pass out. She sure hoped not.
or the two of them would unslip and crash into the rock they were jetting through. Fid tightened his grip. They were moving at an unthinkable speed now. Then a few things happened in rapid succession. First, the force tugging on their bodies was completely lifted. They continued flying forward, but there was nothing pulling them that way. They were untethered, weightless. Then, as quickly as the weight lifted, it was reapplied in equal measure, but this time it was tugging them back the way they had come. They still drove ahead, but they were being slowed now. Finally, they popped out of the grainy rock into a cave the same size as the one they had just zipped through. They had slowed, but they still moved at a remarkable speed and passed through the cave in a split second and back into the orange vastness. "We made it!" shouted Fid. It clicked for Leva. They had just passed through the middle of Remani and were now moving out the other side. "What do we do now?" Leva shouted back. But her body answered her own question as she noticed it slowing dramatically now. "Nothing!" shouted Fid. "We'll be back there soon!" Eventually, they came to a halt and hung in one spot for a moment. It felt the same as when they paused in the air above the great billion trees before barreling back down to the surface. And in the exact same way, they started falling back the direction they just came from. They picked up speed again and emerged from the orange rock back into the gap between it and the grainy core. As they looked down, they saw another message. Unslip once slow enough to survive. Fid followed the instructions and kept at semi-slipping the two of them. Then they broke through the grainy rock again, felt the tug invert once more, popped back out and into the gap, and re-entered the orange rock above. This time they soared much less far into the orange. They hung at the spot and started diving back toward the core again. The pendulum duo swung back and forth again and again, each time cutting speed, shortening the distance, and reading the messages on the core floor over and over. Keep slipping, then unslip once slow enough to survive. Finally, they moved slowly enough where it was indeed safe to unslip. As they popped into the in-between space where the messages were written, Leva gave a couple flaps of her wings, and the two landed on solid ground and let out a cry of triumph. In the commotion, they barely thought to look around. When they finally did, they saw an impressive-looking cave system with bright orange ceilings and deep red floors. They saw orange fruits completely lining the massive walls, and most notably, they saw nearly a dozen living, breathing billions. Chapter 9, Byla. It's wonderful, beautiful, unlike anything I had imagined. I only wish I had not been alone when I discovered it. All things considered, these billions looked pretty regular. Leva expected to find gaunt, destitute folks, walking skeletons, shells of what they once were. They seemed fine. In fact, some of the youngest ones looked like they could be Igos, with huge shoulders and bulging muscles. Other than that, the only discernible difference between the two newcomers and their welcoming party was skin color. She wondered if the ones whose skin was about as dark as hers and Fid's were Rygo's most recent victims. Leva vaguely recognized one of the billions, the oldest and palest in the group, who was the first to speak. "You two are the first to have come down here in a pair." A pause. "And the first to come by flight." She studied Leva's wings. "Billion tree leaves. Interesting. And this?" Looking at the harness Fid had built. "This is quite something. I have dreamt of flying for a long time. How wonderful." Leva didn't know how to react. She was expecting a more excited and less inquisitive welcome. We're here to rescue you," said Leva with an assuring nod from Fid. "Oh, a rescue! Thank you very much," said the eldest billion, whimsically, but without skepticism. "I am eager to hear your plan. Let us walk. I'll show you around our humble cave, and you can tell me how on Remani you found your way here." The billion gestured Fid and Leva over, who put down their gear and followed instinctively. They made to take a step and nearly tripped over themselves. Walking around down here was easier? There was so much less tethering them to the ground than on the surface. Leva and Fid adjusted their gait, found their footing, and made their way over to the eldest billion. Once they were eye to eye, so to speak, with her, it was clear how small she was. Each of them stood a full head higher than she. Despite her small stature, the billion exuded leadership, wisdom, and, perhaps above all, intelligence. The others clearly looked to her for guidance and trusted whatever assessments she would make about Fid and Leva.
There was no protest as the three went on a private tour of the cave.
Before we begin, what are your names?
I'm Leva.
And I'm Fid.
The eldest Bilian turned to them and studied their faces, and not their inventions, for the first time.
Of course Miva's younger made it down here. You have her curiosity and her resolve.
Turning to Fid.
I am a bit surprised to find you here. You don't take after your elder much, do you, Fid?
Well, Gid and I... Fid has Gid's brains. I'm not sure where he got that courage, though, Leva interrupted, elbowing Fid playfully. The Bilian, whose name Leva thought she might know by now, smiled. Are you Kua? Leva asked. Nodding.
It's nice to meet you both.
She nudged the two forward, signaling the formal start of the tour.
We call this place Byla. It has been home to fallen Bilians for 20 rests now, starting with me.
The cave system of Byla was altogether massive.
Is that rests or killer rests?
That was 20 kilorests.
Okay.
Did I say rests?
You said rests.
My bad. 20 kilorests. The cave system of Byla was altogether massive. Kua led them through the main drag, glossing by countless offshoots, some of which were pitch black, others bright orange and shiny. On the group's left were chute entrances, on the right, chute exits. As Leva started to wonder where they led, she heard a commotion coming from the right. A few thuds preceded a loud whoop, and a particularly beefy-looking Bylan younger spilled out from one of the chutes at the group's feet, giggling.
"Watch this!" she said,
and disappeared around a corner. Leva and Fid looked around. Kua stared into space pleasantly. Then they heard a Yahoo! Coming from a chute up ahead. They rushed forward and saw a line of white ropes and a web of netting that stretched across the ceiling. A few youngers were laying up there chatting and comparing their thumbs. The group's attention was called back to the right when they heard a yeet yeet echoing through a bright orange, slippery-looking chute with an upturned nose of a base. In a flash, the Bylan younger from before came into sight. She was a ball, and she zoomed down the hatch, slid up the ramp at the bottom, and soared. She unballed and made herself big in the air. Then she let out another cry of joy, grabbed the farthest white rope, swung forward and up, and let go so that she flew through a small hole in the netting above and landed right on top of the rest of the youngers, who bumped her back playfully. The whole spectacle was not unlike Leva on a float training course. It looked fun.
We have found ways to live normal lives down here, said Kua. Actually, we all play. We build and create.
She gestured forward, and a massive piece of art came into view. It began with an orange path on the ground. Leva and Fid followed it forward and walked the path as it began to spiral to a point. They brushed aside dangling strings of flat white and curlicue orange, and the area opened up to a room with beautiful designs canvassing the massive walls floor to ceiling. Along the walls, they saw thousands of woven braids in white and orange combinations. The braids didn't look like much up close, but standing far back, they could make out faces.
A memorial, Kua said quietly. For the ones that we know about, at least, who did not make it this far.
Leva thought of Koji and shuddered.
We have another one to add.
Kua asked no questions, only nodded. What do you think happens to the ones that don't make it? Fid asked solemnly. The way Fid phrased the question made Leva wonder about what comes after death, but she knew Fid meant this more literally. Kua must have understood as well, and she answered thoughtfully.
Well, since we can't ask them, we can't be sure, but we have a few hypotheses. There are two types of fallen Bilians, those who come on their own accord, like you two, and those who are not given a choice. When Kua said this, Leva could almost feel the force with which Raigo had pushed down on her when he tried to send her into Remani. Kua seemed to be waiting for a question. Fid turned to Leva, who was in her own head still, and then back to Kua and said, We know about Raigo. He tried to do it to Leva. Fid squeezed her shoulder. Kua took this in. I see. How ironic that you ended up here after escaping him nonetheless. A pause. It seems that the accidental Bylans, let's call them, have a low survival rate. We know because our most recent Bylans have confirmed who had gone missing when they were still on the surface. If someone went missing up there and is not down here, well... Fid and Leva glanced toward the ground. Kua went on. We believe that starvation or physical trauma are the main causes of death for fallen billions who don't make it. Starvation happens when the billion isn't quite equipped for the journey. Imagine Rygo slips you under the crust. Fid closed his eyes to do so. Leva did not need to. Now you have a few options. If you're proficient in semi-slipping, which most billions are not, you can crawl back to the surface. You can also wait and starve. The final option is to full slip and see what you find. If you go for long enough, you'll find us. However, most folks don't carry enough spare slip lemons to make it this far. Presumably, they burned through whatever resources they had stored up, unslip, and remained fixed in place somewhere between us and the surface. Dying stuck on a planet that is fixed in place is a bit poetic. Remani remains. But I imagine it's a pretty brutal way to go. Fid and Leva grimaced. Kua was much more matter-of-fact than Mivo when explaining such bleak information. Still, Leva could see that she was compassionate. Sorry, Kua said. I can be a bit too blunt with these things. Should we stop? In unison, no. Fid and Leva had come all this way for answers. They could handle the unpleasant facts. Right. Well, the good news is that starvation is much less likely for the intentional billions who came here on their own accord. To most billions' surprise, it's not a particularly far journey, and intentional billions seem to over-prepare. Leva looked down at their supply of slip lemons and counted 16 left. She thought of Fid's constant checklisting and wondered if she would have underprepared without him. Not to mention, there are a couple accidental billions, Hosa and Tonk, that happen to have enough lemons on hand to make it as well. Leva remembered hearing about those two a few kilorests back. Before they disappeared, they had been asking the elders a lot of questions about full slipping. Too many questions, according to Rygo, presumably. Their journey wasn't easy, though. Because they couldn't semi-slip, they could not move their arm while stuck in the ground to actually grab the lemon. They had to wait until they hit the first cave under the crust. By that time, they had gained a decent chunk of speed. They broke a couple bones when they unslipped and hit the cave floor, but they were in decent enough shape when they got here that they made a full recovery. Physical trauma is the other cause of death that we think is common. If Hosa and Tonk were moving a bit faster or landed in a less forgiving spot, they would not survive the contact with the floor upon unslipping. There are some, no doubt, that unslip in that moment and die in the cave. Fid interrupted gently. We think that's what happened to our friend Koji. We found him in that same cave. Kua nodded. Let's hope he died on impact and did not starve up there. Leva considered this for a moment and decided that death on impact was likely. She pictured Koji's mangled leg, as well as the oranges in clear eye shot of him. If he had just been hurt, he would have crawled over to the oranges to hold on a little longer. That deduction brought her a small amount of relief. She would not ask Fid what he thought, lest he bring up something that she hadn't considered. Kua continued. There are a couple other ways that trauma can play out. It's conceivable that a fallen billion, full slipping for the first time, could get scared at the speed they were picking up or second-guess their decision in the first place. In that moment, if they unslipped, it would be like running into a wall at top speed. That would do it. Kua took a deep breath. I find the last way the most tragic. One fallen billion made it all the way here, but when he saw that he'd made it to the destination, he unslipped and slammed into the Byla floor. You saw the signs on your way in? The two nodded. That's why. On a more positive note, there are also several different ways that fallen billions use to make it to Byla. They all have one thing in common, a sufficient amount of slip lemons, but the way they use the lemons varies. Some, like Hosa and Tonk, full slip. They oscillate back and forth until they're moving slowly enough to safely unslip. Beautiful, and done in no time. Others, like Lyra and Mott, take a painstakingly measured and slow approach of slipping and unslipping every so often. We estimate that this method takes 3 whole rests. But it works, is safe, and requires less lemon consumption since there is no oscillation back and forth. Kua was quite cheery now for someone that had just covered various causes of death. Well, that's enough for now. Let me keep showing you around. As the group continued to make their way through, the ceiling waxed and waned, but it never fell short of anything less than 50 fids tall. In particularly cavernous areas, Kua's voice echoed, humming gently between the walls, which were lined by orange fruits throughout. The fruit started at roughly 5 fids up and continued all the way to the bright orange ceiling. Fid pointed and asked a question that he probably knew the answer to already. Why do those fruits start at that line? Any guesses, Fid? Said Kua in a remarkably Miva-ish way. Leva wondered if Kua ever taught young Billions. Did you pick them? Asked Fid. Kua nodded. Those orange fruits are the reason we have survived here for so long. We ate the ones within reach first. How do you get the ones out of reach? Fid asked. Kua beamed back toward Fid. Care to guess? Fid was clearly having a great time playing this conjecture game with Kua. Leva found the two brainiacs a little annoying. Why does everything have to be a quiz? She held her tongue and let the two have their fun. Fid walked over and pressed his hand against the wall. Maybe something like this. He took a few steps back, charged at the wall, and attempted to run up it and grab the lowest hanging fruit. He fell a solid 3 fids short. Nothing from Kua. No, that can't be it, Fid muttered to himself, pacing. Maybe a sort of tower of Billions, then. Leva, could you help me test something? She glided over, humoring him. Fid started to clamber up onto Leva's shoulders, but quickly gave up on that idea, too. Still muttering to the floor, no, it'd take 5 of us to reach that high. Then suddenly his eyes shot up. Making flinching gestures in quick succession, his palms went from tucked between his arms to upward toward the ceiling to resting atop his head. Leva knew this series of moves to only mean Eureka for Fid, who went on. You must have built something like this. He pulled out his extendo. Kua tilted her head to the side as Fid extended it to its full length, just high enough to reach the orange fruits. He clicked a button, and the clasp at the end opened up. Grunting quietly, he jimmied the extendo back and forth for a few seconds until he successfully knocked a fruit down. Triumphantly, he stuck out the hand that wasn't wielding the extendo to catch the fruit, but bobbled it onto the ground. He shrugged and looked to Kua expectingly. You two have all sorts of contraptions. Let me have a look at that. Fid handed her the extendo, which she turned over in her hands. How did you make this, Fid? Beaming. Care to guess? Kua shot a grin back of her own. Leva rolled her eyes. Well, said Kua, building a telescoping retractable device isn't a particularly tough project, but what makes this device special is that it is all one piece of material. I assume that's because you wanted to be able to cleanly slip the whole thing? Fid nodded as Kua semi-slipped the extendo and swished it back and forth through the cave wall. Continuing her train of thought, could it be a special material, something pliable in some contexts, stiff in others? Fid slightly squinted, and his eyes rolled left as he evaluated the question. No. The tiny word persisted longer than usual, pouring out of his mouth like sap. Kua raised an eyebrow and pursed her lips in thought. Then she shrugged and said, All right, Fid, I give up. And she handed him back the extendo. Well, said Fid, a bit more bashfully now, I started with a smooth rock, like that one. He pointed at a rock that would make an easy 2-handed carry, but a cumbersome 1-handed. But smoother. Then I semi-slipped it. Kua's eyes lit up. Leva could only presume that Kua had just connected the dots on where this was going. That was fast. He continued on, regaining full confidence and excitement. I semi-slipped it the tiniest amount, and then I sort of pushed on it with another rock, brushing it out like this. He made a kneading gesture. It started to flatten out until I got it to be this thin. He squinted one eye and held the extendo up to demonstrate the thickness. Once the sheet of rock was the length of the fully extended extendo, I rolled it onto itself to make a long tube. I wanted it to be portable though, so I cut it into sections and made each one slightly less wide than the one before it. Then I kind of rolled the tip of each new chunk on itself to get it to be a little narrower than the rest of the piece, but a little wider than the piece after it. He held out his hands, palms down, and moved them back and forth to demonstrate the motion. And then I just put all the sections together, starting with the biggest one as the base and putting the next biggest one through the bottom of it. The top of each piece is small enough to pass through the one before it, and the bottom is big enough to catch. The last thing I needed was a cap to prevent all the pieces from falling out the bottom, and that was it. The first extendo, I think. He flung the extendo out, and Leva watched closer as each piece extended out from the previous one. It was actually pretty cool. Kua was flabbergasted. Such a simple-looking tool, derived from such a brilliant technique. Brilliant. The word echoed in Leva's head, and it renewed her appreciation of Fid. Kua, the greatest mind in Billion history, was blown away by Fid's creation. To Leva, it was perfectly ordinary for Fid to invent something like this, but to anyone else, this was absolutely extraordinary. He was the first to use semi-slipping to permanently change the very shape of something. Fid, who was just 6 kilorests, had invented an entirely new craft. I can't wait to learn about your other inventions, you two, and to show you some of mine, said Kua. Leva thought back to the drawings, blueprints, and messy notes posted all around the room dedicated to Kua that Rygo had essentially tried to kill her in. Then she realized it. Rygo must have done the same thing to Kua herself. That room wasn't dedicated to her. It wasn't an homage to Kua's work with Rygo. It was a trophy of Rygo's final work of Kua. Kua, she said, can you tell us about Rygo? Kua spoke slowly and deliberately, chewing on each of the words that came out of her mouth. Yes, I can tell you about Rygo. Then she flipped a switch and was cheery and intellectual again. And I will, I promise. But you still don't know how he picked these fruits. Turning to Fid, we don't have extendos down here. Calling out now, Jua, can you come out to... Jua, can you come show our new friends how we pick these high-up fruits? The resemblance between Kua and her younger was uncanny. Kua was perhaps the smallest elder Leva had seen. Jua was a near exact replica, but she came in half the size. They had the same juxtaposed facial features with round chins and angular cheeks, tiny noses above wide mouths, and eyes that were simultaneously, inexplicably gentle and hard at the same time. They looked unlike anyone Leva had seen, but they were remarkably beautiful. Jua turned to Fid and Leva. Which one do you want? Kua answered them through a wide grin. The highest one! Then her younger did something entirely unexpected. She pulled out one of the orange fruits from her pocket and scarfed it down, much like anyone would do with a slip lemon before using its power. What are we about to see? Leva wondered. Jua crouched and pressed down into the ground. She widened her stance without lifting her legs, grinding bits of rock together under her feet and creating small piles of dirt between her toes. She flexed her leg muscles, which seemed to grow 1.5 times their previous size. Leva shuddered as Jua's visible strength reminded her of Rygo's. Then Jua took a deep breath, sank down a hair deeper, and exploded out of her stance. She shot upward in a huge jump, at least 12 fids tall. At the apex, she reached for one of the tallest fruits and then came crashing down violently, but in control. The entire motion up and down was a perfect mirror, and she landed precisely in the spot from which she had leapt. She tossed the fruit to an incredulous Fid, whose mouth and eyes were wide open. That concludes our tour, Kua announced. Once Fid regained the composure he had lost during the physical spectacle, his eyes narrowed for a moment, and then his face unscrunched. He had deduced how the whole thing worked. Leva turned to him and asked, So what happened there, Fid? Amused that Leva could tell he had already deduced how the whole thing worked, Fid explained, Well, I think that we have all the necessary information for this from what we know about floatberries. Cool! A new fruit! Exclaimed Leva. Is it weightlessness like floatberries, or... Kua cocked her head to the side. Fid went on. This orange fruit must follow the same rules, just with different powers. Turning to the side, Kua would have eaten the orange fruits in the 30 rests before turning 15 kilorests, probably knowing nothing about their abilities. Then at 30, Kua had Jua, who could tap into the orange fruit's power. I bet there are other youngers here with the same abilities too. Any younger who came into being inside Remani would be able to use the orange fruit that their elder had eaten. Any elder down here could not, but they could slip. Kua let him finish and then asked a question. Sorry, floatberries? Leva and Fid explained and exchanged fruits with Kua. As Leva and Fid inspected the new one, Kua provided some detail. This fruit bestows extraordinary strength upon its user. I call them macho
But it's clearly a satsuma, Jua cut in. So everyone else just calls them sumos for short.
Leva didn't know what a mango or a satsuma was. She wondered how Jua possibly could. Maybe it was just some younger elder defiance, but that was neither here nor there. Kua continued, yes, sumos, in exaggerated air quotes, are the lifeblood of Byla. All of us have survived off of them, and Byla youngers have successfully harnessed their powers to build up our small domain. We use them for just about everything. The juice of the sumo makes excellent ink. The white pith, when woven together, makes excellent rope. It can be a tool, a material for art, or a net to play or sleep on. The sumo peel has cool properties too. If you rub it together, it becomes incredibly slippery. We've lined some of the chutes with it. That helps us get around quickly. It's also just really fun. Leva was decidedly impressed by the resourcefulness of Kua and the Bylans. She wanted to stay for a while, and she could see that Fid did too. There was so much to explore down here, and so much to learn from Kua. But the longer they stayed, the more likely it was that Rygo would strike again. What if he came for Miva and Pava next? Kua, what you've built here is amazing. Is it going to be hard for you to leave? Kua smiled. You really are Miva's younger. So perceptive. I suppose I've dodged the subject for long enough. Yes, truth be told, I don't want to go. But I owe it to the Bylans. You have a plan? Let's hear it. Stumbling over his words a bit, Fid muttered, well, this was mostly an exploring type mission. I figured we should figure out what was down here first and then come up with a plan to get you out. Kua nodded. You two can leave the same way you came. That is good. Leva, can you come back for us after that, one at a time? Yes, of course, Leva replied. Well, Fid interrupted. Leva could bring some of the Bylans back, but there are a couple limitations. First, she can only float the same amount of weight that she weighs, so basically that means she can only bring Bylans who are smaller than she is. Maybe if they're a little bigger, she could still do it, but if the difference in their weight is substantial, she won't be able to fly. At this, Kua took out some sort of writing instrument and sketched the names of all of the Bylans onto the cave wall in bright orange. Elders, Kua, Hosa, Tonk, Lyra, Mott. Youngers, Jua, Gosa, Sonk, Kyra. She scratched off Hosa, Tonk, Sonk, Lyra, and Mott. Leva presumed that the rest were her size or smaller. Leva picked up where Fid had left off. I also need my passenger to be able to semi-slip. I can float them or slip them, but I can't do both to someone else at the same time. Kua crossed off the rest of the youngers, as they cannot slip. That left just Kua herself. Leva could tell what she was thinking. There was no way Kua would leave her people down here alone. Kua crossed herself off the list and crossed her arms. Not without every single Bylan with me. Leva and Fid did not protest. Instead, Fid moved on to other ideas. Kua, is there a way we could use the sumos somehow? I have considered this before. The youngers are so strong that conceivably they could jump their way out of Remani. Similar to the approach that you two took, they could pair with the elders who would semi-slip them as they traveled. That's perfect, Leva interrupted. I'm afraid not, Lev, said Kua. Yes, the elders here should be able to semi-slip. We've been practicing with the, 1.5 lemons we collectively possess. 1.5 lemons is not enough to get us out of here. I can bring you some, said Leva excitedly. I'll head to the surface and return with as many as I can find. Kua nodded again pensively. I appreciate that. However, I don't think you could find enough lemons up there to make it work. We need to travel a massive distance back to the surface. Falling into the planet is one thing. Escaping it, fighting back against its pull, is another. I believe that it would take hundreds. Dejected, Leva looked up at Fid, who was scratching his head and racking his brain for other solutions. It's Fid. He must be able to fix this. This time, he could not. Kua continued on. If we tried to make it out with slip lemons, in all likelihood, we would make it part of the way, and then we'd get stuck. In that moment, something clicked for Leva. Wait a second. Quickly, she rifled through her bag and pulled out the sealed note that Miva had given her. She flipped it around to face Fid and Kua, who raised a collective eyebrow and read it aloud in unison. For when you're stuck. Open it! Yelped Fid in an uncharacteristically frantic way. Leva did as she was told. In it, she found a jar of yellow powder and a longer note. She began reading aloud. Leva, I'm not sure I can adequately express how proud... Her cheeks flushed. We don't need to read this whole thing. Scanning the note. Let's see. Fid swiped it from her hand and took over. Yes, we do. Clearing his throat. Leva, I'm not sure I can adequately express how proud I am of you, and of your best friend Fid. Does it really say that? Leva asked. I took a creative liberty, Fid responded through a grin. It is true. Silently, Leva agreed. She let him go on. How proud I am of you, and of your best friend Fid. You are the most courageous and curious Billion I know. Generations of us had not dared ask the questions that you and Fid did. Turning to the group. That time I was actually in there. Bringing his attention back to the note. The questions that you and Fid did. If you're reading this, you might need some help. I wish I was there to actually lend a hand, but this will have to do. The small jar here is filled with lemon dust. It's something that Gid and I have been working on and collecting for years. It turns out the most potent part of the lemon is its rind. It doesn't taste great, but it's worth it. This dust is comprised of shaved rind from hundreds of lemons. Eating all of it would be like popping 1,000 slip lemons. In case you underpack and run out of slip lemons, this should get you back home. Please come home. Miva. Kua, Fid, and Leva sat still for a few moments. To Leva's surprise, it was Kua who broke the silence. This might just work.
Chapter 10. Out of Remani. Of course, the most likely outcome is that I die before any of us, for that matter, make it out of here. I feel braver than ever when facing that inevitability. I'm happy for the life I've created in Byla. The plan was simple. They would pair up and jump their way out of Remani. The problem was that they didn't have an even number. Mott, at 13 kilorests, was the only fallen Billion without an accompanying younger. That made 5 Bylans who could slip and 4 youngers who could jump. Fid and Kua worked through a clever solution together. They knew that Leva could float more than one person as long as her passenger's total weight was not much more than hers. So Leva, paired with a combination of Fid, Kua, and Jua, could work, as those 3 were the smallest in the group by far. Jua and Fid with Leva seemed promising, but that would leave 5 Bylans with slipping abilities and only 3 with jumping abilities. The imbalance remained if Leva teamed up with Jua and Kua. Fid certainly did not have super strength. However, there was one final option that left an even number of slippers and jumpers and made it all work. The newly bonded trio of Fid, Leva, and Kua. It was decided. 4 pairs and 1 trio would travel out of Remani together. Hosa and Gosa, Tonk and Sonk, Lyra and Kira, Mott and Jua, and Fid, Leva, and Kua. With the plan finalized, Kua, Leva, and Fid relayed it to the rest of the Bylans. They had very few questions. Amidst the constant, gentle glow of the tangerine walls, Billion and Bylan made their preparations to go. There was a palpable feeling in the Bylan caves as they packed and gathered, stowed and strapped. Focus superseded whimsy. Leva could only imagine how they must be feeling. Having witnessed Rygo's victims descend into Remani with gruesome consistency, the elders had probably accepted their life down here as permanent. The youngers had never known anything else but these caves. They had bathed under the glow of orange rock in place of suns. They had felt small in the face of massive caverns, never comparing themselves to a Billion tree. If they made it out, Leva vowed to bring each of them to her favorite spot above the trees, so that they could look out as far as the eye could see and take in the world that is theirs as much as anyone's. The world that was waiting for them. The world that Rygo deprived them of. After they were through with logistical prep, it was time to say goodbye to their home. Using Kua's writing instrument, each Bylan etched their name into the main facade of rock. Hosa, Gosa, Sonk, Tonk, Lyra, Kira, Mott, Jua, Kua. Kua handed the tool to Leva. She made to protest, but stopped herself, knowing it was no use. Leva, Fid. Leva handed it back to Kua, who wrote below the names, Citizens of Byla. Then she placed more detailed notes on the ground, with advice for future fallen Billions that may find their way there, Leva presumed. Kua turned to the group and spoke. I'm not sure if I'm about to come home or leave it. Byla and each of you are all I have known for so long.
Somehow, as we have lived and grown, these have become the happiest killerests of my life. I'm scared to leave. I imagine some of you are too. Kua sighed and began to pace. But we are not meant to confine ourselves in this way. We should always explore, discover, and fly. She winked at Leva. Staying here is conforming to Rygo's worldview, where fear and tradition are placed above all. Kua paused and stood proudly. Bylans make their own traditions. We make discoveries, and we share them with the world. We owe it to the billions above to share what we have found now that it is possible to do so. And we owe it to each other to allow ourselves to experience the joy of our remarkable story. This will be a trying journey for all of us. As you know, it will not be possible to stay together as a group, so you will need to rely on your pair to get you through this. If you feel apprehension during the journey, name it. If you need a break, speak up. Until we reach the surface, the only enemy is our own minds. Let your partner support you in that fight. I will support you in the next one. Quietly, Leva despaired that the wider group could not feasibly stick together as they moved toward the surface of the planet. The Bylans had such a beautiful community. It would be much less nerve-wracking to go through this as one. That was neither here nor there, though. All she could do now was hope to reunite them with them at the meeting spot, in the cave system near the crust under Rygo's house, where Koji's body continued to rot. After speaking, Kua exchanged long embraces with each of the Bylans. Others followed suit, seeking comfort in anticipation of their journey to come. Standing off to the side, Leva saw Kua kiss Jua on the forehead, then whisper something that left Jua wiping tears on her elder's shoulder. Leva knew the gut-wrenching feeling of saying goodbye to your elder. She consoled herself with the knowledge that they would hug again quite soon, ready for their next chapter on the surface of Remani. A moment later, Kua walked over to Fid and Leva and handed Fid a huge book. Stuffed full of papers, it nearly dwarfed his chest. Leva recognized some of the drawings, blueprints, and notes that peeked out. They were just like the ones in Rygo's den. I don't understand, said Fid. Don't you need all this? It's all up here, Kua grinned, pointing to her head. So I want you to hang on to my research for me. If something were to happen, you're the only one who could pick up where I left off. Fid furrowed his brow, but nodded and tightened his grip. Leva let out a small breath of relief. She didn't want to be responsible for all those precious nerd documents, for one, and for two, she agreed. Fid really was the only billion who could decipher, let alone expand upon, Kua's work. With a dip of her head, Kua turned to Leva in their conversation. The two things that matter most in the world are thoughtful minds and thoughtful friends. Let's go. Angling herself to the group, Kua savored a deep inhale. Are we ready? The Bylans nodded fervently, a few cheers rising from the especially raucous youngers. Just like Kua, they took a collective breath, then they devoured their fruits and were off. One by one, Leva watched each pair spring straight up from the grainy red floor and disappear through a canopy of tangerine stone. The Bylan pairs would move in bursts, shooting up and slowing down with each jump through the planet. Leva scarfed down her allotted berries shortly after the last Bylan pair, Fid and Kua on each side of her. Since they were flying, the trio would need fewer stops but would make similar time overall. Tonk and Sonk should get to the cave first, Kua yelled over Leva's shoulder. They're the strongest. It's hard to say for sure, but I think we should get there around the same time as Jua and Mott. Then Hosa and Gosa, then Lyra and Kira. The order didn't matter so much, thought Leva, as long as they all made it to the surface. But unwilling to lose focus on her flight path, she said nothing in response. The journey back was a lot less fun than on the way in. Flying toward the center of the planet, they descended in tune with the pull of Remani. Flying out, they fought vigorously against it. Leva's float helped substantially, but since the combined weight of Fid and Kua was slightly greater than Leva's, she couldn't make the group completely weightless. The journey was difficult, sweaty work, and the farther they went, the more arduously Remani tugged them back to its center. Otherwise, the flight out was the same as the way in, but reversed and slowed. Leva had more time to notice the creatures moving through the rock, the subtle changes in orange, the smooth sections of slab against the grainy, disparate chunks. She was stoic and calm. Kua, on the other hand, was wide-eyed and awestruck. After all, it had been much longer since she had made the journey.
For the first time in 20 kilorests, Kua absorbed the strange and curious beauty of Remani's insides at a speed that allowed for detailed observation. Even though Fid had made the journey not 2 rests ago, he shared Kua's demeanor. He pointed out white chunks of rock and theorized about their origins, and she posed questions about whether more rock types meant more fruits. "What do you think Rygo will do when he sees us?" Leva interrupted her companions with a shout, struck with a pang of fear. She could feel Kua's chest expand against her hip in a deep breath. "If he's the same Rygo that I knew, I think he will attack," returned Kua. "He is clever, but brutish. I don't expect he could formulate a winning plan with any tactic other than force, though I have been wrong about his cunning before." In response to Kua's uncertainty, Leva wanted to exude confidence. She was supposed to say, "I'll take care of him, no problem." And Kua was to say, "Absolutely not, this is not your fight." They should argue back and forth about who would get to battle, and eventually they should compromise on fighting him together. Leva wanted to say anything, but the words stuck in her throat and refused to budge. Rygo, in all his fierce cruelty, had awakened a terror, a hesitation in her that she never even knew was there. "We have Suma's strength on our side too now, and strength in numbers," Fid offered. He clenched his fist more tightly around his extendo. Leva knew that he was posturing a bit. The Bilan youngers were strong, yes, but they were more similar to Kaigo than his elder. What's more, their count of sumos would get the Bilans to Remani's crust, but would it last them through a battle with Rygo? Worse, could Rygo have found them out? And did that spell trouble for Miva and Pava? Was Leva leading the Bilans into a snare, one sumo jump from being trapped, as she had been before? "No matter whose response, ours remains the same," Kua called decisively. "Expose him for what he is, and protect one another." No one said anything else. After a moment, Leva took a breath, erased her face, and returned her full attention to the flight. As long as the trio and the Bilan pairs waited for one another in Koji's cave, they could emerge to the surface 11 strong and confront Rygo as a unit. If he attacked, even with his superior strength, their odds were good. That's assuming that all 11 would make the journey, an assumption Leva simply would not confront. About a quarter rest into the first long stretch of flight, the 3 of them stopped for a break. Fid relaxed the semi-slips that they were barely able to pass through the rock. They moved in slow motion and took their time to lay flat and get comfortable. Fid asked if they were ready and received 2 nods. With a nod back, he unslipped everyone. They laid there, within the rock, fixed in absolute stillness. Leva thought about one of her elder's lectures from a few kilorests back, when Miva had the class practice slipping with only their feet in the ground. An exercise of control and discovery, each younger would wait until their slip lemons wore off to feel what it was like to unslip into something solid. Some youngers hated it and dug themselves out. She and Fid both found it strange, but interesting. Then Fid did like he always did, and asked a good question. "If we can move through the ground, why isn't dirt getting stuck in my foot when I stop slipping?" Just as naturally, Miva gave a good answer. "Imagine you're walking around in a big hole," Miva began to pace. "Then the hole fills with mud up to your hips. This is semi-slipping." Leva perked up at the mention of mud. Miva continued. "You start trudging through the mud. It's hard, but you can still move." Miva demonstrated, slowing her gait. "Then the mud turns to solid dirt, and you're stuck. You have unslipped. If you slip again," Miva continued, "you can go back to the feeling of moving through the hole with nothing in it, though this time you will fall straight down without any ground to brace yourself against. That's why we don't full slip. Now, if you semi-slip, you're back to moving through the mud. If you turn up your semi-slip, it will feel more like water and less like mud. If you turn it down, it'll feel more like honey. When we slip, we are not allowing solid objects to move through us. We are unlocking the ability to wedge our way through the particles of a solid." That was one of the many classes to end with Leva hoisting Fid out of the earth and running off to run slip lemon experiments. The version of Leva that sat inside the sienna rock of Remani's cave system thought, with quite some pleasure, that the nuance of her slipping abilities had come a long way since that class. Fid's skills were racing to catch up to hers too. That same Leva closed her eyes, relieved that the rock and mud that held her in place was firmly outside of her body, and rested. Fid woke first and tapped Kua and Leva awake with a swish of his semi-slipped arm. Though she was exhausted from yesterday's long flight, Leva roused quickly and made to set off for the last leg of the journey. Both excitement and dread permeated her mind. Thoughts of reemerging as a collective and then immediately confronting their common enemy spiraled backwards and forward in her head, never quite sitting right. Despite Fid and Kua's reassurance, Leva could not escape the thought of facing Rygo by herself. What if the others don't make it? What will I do? Her mind raced as the three of them started to soar through Remani. Fid and Kua held on tight. As they rose through the rock, each layer of orange grew duller and messier. Clicks passed and their surroundings became familiar. Leva sensed they were close. Any time now they would pop into the cave. Swinging down, hard, she used her wings to speed their ascent. The trio climbed as quickly as Leva could take them. She wanted to surface soon, but more than that, she needed to get to the meeting spot immediately to see if her friends had arrived. Neither of her companions spoke. This final leg of the journey was like peering around an endless corner. They flew upwards, but the rock extended always a little further, then a little more after that. Leva was moving the group at an impressive speed now, nearly matching her pace from the same section of the descent. With every flap of her wings, she grew more terrified that the Bilan pairs would not be there when she arrived and would never come. Leva could only find out if she turned and just got there. All of a sudden, she did. The trio burst out of the dark orange stone into Koji's cave. Stunned by the open space, Leva was despondent. No one had arrived yet, and they would have to wait in agony, desperately hoping for each pair to surface. But when she had the wherewithal to take a proper look around, horror struck. It was far worse than Leva feared. Tonk and Sonk were splayed out on the cave floor across from Koji, their clothing laid in tatters, ripped and stained with blood. Tonk's face swelled, and Sonk's neck mottled with bruising. They were not moving. Chapter 11, Reunion. I do not believe that strength is found within, as many say. I would not have had the strength myself to press on and build Byla, not without the others. No, strength is found within your community. Before Leva knew what she was looking at, Kua leapt into action, tossing her companions to one side and twisting through the air. "Check on the others," Kua ordered. Her upward momentum landed her feet first on the ceiling, from which she crouched and, with remarkable similarity to a Bilan younger, vaulted toward the cave floor with a mighty jump. Leva was struck with panic. Once shoved, she and Fid tumbled upside down, then smack! Hit the peachy trunk of a stalactite, sending them into a spin. After a dizzying breath, Leva collected herself enough to land them near the floor of the cave, near Tonk and Sonk's bodies. As soon as their feet touched the ground, Fid shook himself free and stumbled toward the fallen Bilans, dragging their aid kit from his pack. Leva swiveled around to locate Kua. There. The Bilan elder was sprinting off to the far side of the cave. Her small form barreled toward a hulking figure, toward Rygo. At the sight of him, Leva choked, and her vision blurred with tears. Breaths came faster and faster until her heaving chest could barely keep up. How is he here? How did he know? A whining ring pierced her ears. Her stomach, which roiled with nausea on seeing their injured companions, threatened to turn inside out. Then a voice cut through. Small hands shook her head and slapped at her cheeks. "Leva!" She finally heard Fid howling her name, and sensation crawled back into her fingers, arms, legs, toes. Leva unclenched her fists from where they tangled in her hair and stood up out of a crouch. "What do we do?" Leva pleaded. "We help!" shouted Fid, furiously handling rind pith bandages and anti-oxidation patches. "I'll check on Tonk and Sonk. Go to Kua. You can do this." Leva could not. She stood there, paralyzed by fear, as Fid tried to toss her his extendo. The compacted tube clattered at her feet. "No! Stay put!" Kua shouted back. She zipped to and fro, trading lightning-fast jabs for each of Rygo's heavy blows. Somehow, she heard Fid amidst the chaos. Tears spilling over her cheeks, Leva screeched, "I can... No! But It's okay, Lev. Don't move." Leva's eyes welled, wondering why Kua gave her that order. Was it to protect her or to absolve her of guilt? Kua had commanded that Leva do what she was already doing. Nothing.
Mont and Jua shot up out of the ground, within earshot but far from the brawl. After a relieved whoop, Kua gave them the same command. Stay put, let her do the fighting. Raigo made to holler something at the bystanders, but Kua cut him off in a hurtling forward assault. She jumped with incredible speed, maneuvering her body around his thrown fist until she scaled his whole arm. With a theatrical somersault, Kua reached his shoulder and bounced off of it, driving a wickedly sharp knee into Raigo's windpipe. He spat blood on her torso. Kua fell into her landing position, directly on Raigo's foot, and stomped with all of her admittedly slight mass. As he bent with pain, Kua berated Raigo with punches and chops, buzzing at him from all directions. Leva watched, mouth agape at the quick movements. Kua was whitewater, Raigo a clumsy fish, subject to the whims of the current. He swatted about, never coming close to her, as she backed him into the corner of a cave. Small quarters favored Kua's fighting style. As they danced into a narrow bend of stone, Kua ran sideways along the wall, peppering Raigo with jabs to the lower back. The attack was a melody, triplets of crunches, quarter-note gasps, but Raigo would not go down. Every few breaths, Kua skidded and slid out of the way of Raigo's oaf-like punches. Each miss struck heavy and merciless against the wall, and the nearby stalagmites shuddered in response. Kua slowed her onslaught, giving Raigo an opportunity. He took it. Raigo wound back to muster a huge punch. Leva and Fid cried out, screaming for their friend to dodge, but Kua jumped up and towed the massive arm advancing upon her. The youngers winced, but just when they expected the blow to land, Kua whispered through his arm, fully slipped. Behind him now, she unslipped and snatched hold of his head to brace herself. Raigo's body swallowed Kua's form, blocking her from Leva's vision. The brawling pair stood across the cave from the Bilan youngers, Raigo wide-eyed and seething with rage, consistently a step behind his old friend. In another instant, Kua's nimble fingers flickered across Raigo's face and seemed to pluck something out, flinging it into a spat on the cave wall. It was his left eye, freed from its socket. Raigo's howls of pain and rage were deafening in the confined space, ricocheting off cracks and craters in an echoing roar. Kua let up for a moment, and Raigo backed away, scarfing down a few oranges. The fruit gave him a second wind, and he jumped back into the fight with renewed speed. Raigo nearly matched Kua now, trading blocks and dodges. She could no longer avoid every swing so handily, and Leva worried for her friend. Kua was winning so far, but if Raigo landed a single hit, it would demolish her. He only needed one good chance and one correct guess. Kua had successfully slipped through Raigo before, but if he slipped too, he would have made contact. She made a confident play last time. Now that slipping was an open tactic, could Kua read her old friend well enough to keep the upper hand? Raigo managed to get in close. He kicked out before Kua had time to move. She braced for impact, this time staying unslipped. Raigo's foot passed through her. Lucky. Kua took her opportunity and returned a sweeping kick at his ankle. Contact. A small cracking sound and another howl from Raigo. Incredibly, he ignored the pain and launched his broken foot back toward Kua, who stayed unslipped. She was right again. Leva heard nothing but a whoosh of air and Raigo's snarl as his leg passed through. At once, Kua slipped her hand and jabbed Raigo's ankle exactly where she had broken it. Raigo cursed and reared back, searching the room for something that could help him in the fight. He found it. Taking 3 huge steps away from Kua, Raigo batted Fid aside to pick up an unconscious but breathing Tonk. "No!" Kua shouted, circling back as Raigo lazily tossed Tonk high up into the air. Despite the length of their ongoing scuffle, Kua was still quick on her feet. She darted over and, with a spectacular jump, caught her Bilan family member on the descent of his fall. While Kua and Tonk soared through the air, Raigo closed in on them. Steps behind, Leva rushed over to Fid, who was returning to his feet after Raigo's smack. He pushed her hands away, begging Leva to turn back around as he recognized the immediate danger. "Kua had to unslip to catch Tonk, and Raigo knows it," he squawked out, horrified. Leva spun around, and the scene unfolded in front of them just microclicks after Fid's revelation. As she fell, Kua curled herself around Tonk, refusing to let go or let Tonk take the hit that was coming. With terrible precision, Raigo clapped the hardest part of his hands on each side of Kua's body, crushing her frame inwards. She fell to the ground, limp, and Tonk's unconscious body spilled out from her grasp. Despite a weak leg, and many injuries that left him dripping blood onto the cave floor, Rygo finished what he had started 20 kilorests ago. Kua was dead. Leva's senses froze up, failing her one by one. In the direction of Kua's body, Leva's eyes glossed over details, unable to focus. She saw nothing. An ocean rang in her ears, drowning Fid's horrified screams. She stood, but could not feel her feet beneath her. She did not breathe, and around her, all was still. Kua was still. Moments before, Leva felt fear as it sent trembles through her knees and dripped anxiety like icy water on her neck. Now she felt nothing. A strangled, tearful cry. Mott howled, mourning their kind and brilliant leader. The best of Byla had fallen. The survivors, distraught, shrank before Rygo. Jua alone did not falter. She stepped forward, tears dripping onto the cave floor, but standing as tall as her small frame could muster. At this, Leva gasped, awakened. Instinct, emotion, duty. If Kua's younger bit out the courage to face Rygo, so too could Leva. If not Leva, then who, now that Kua lay lifeless at the foot of Bilia's so-called leader? Physical and mental awareness rushed back to Leva tenfold. From bloody scratches on Rygo's face to exact positions of each stalagmite around them, her senses formed a technicolor vision of the scene. Leva's fear dissipated in a breath, seared away by feverish rage. She floated and kicked off, flying toward Rygo with impressive speed. He made to swat her away, but she read his telegraph move and easily zipped around him. Slip strategy raced through her mind. There was no information yet. Should she slip? Should she stay? Rygo twisted and flung himself around. If he got too close, even Leva's speed wouldn't save her. She shifted into a charge and slipped, burying her shoulder into Rygo's slipped knee. Contact. Yes! His balance wavered slightly, but Rygo answered with a shove that launched Leva off his leg and sent her flying backwards. A quick somersault left Leva facing back toward her foe, where she contorted into a cartwheel. On planting her feet, she skidded to a stop and lunged back to the starting spot next to Jua. Leva launched again. This time she avoided contact with Rygo, circled him, and zoomed back to the same spot. She did this again, and again. He watched her zip to and fro with a cruel laugh. "Too scared to come near, Lev?" Rygo snorted. Leva growled back under her breath, but said nothing. She was not scared. She was not taking precautions. She was taking measurements. Once more, Leva kicked off. This time she leapt into the ground and disappeared from sight. Rygo readied his stance, unsure where to look. His head swiveled furiously and veins popped out from a neck as thick as Leva's torso. As Rygo flailed, Leva hunted him from below. She could not see through the crust, but she knew to the nanoclick how long it would take to reach him. Gliding under the surface, Leva only needed to adjust her timing slightly with respect to semi-slip friction, and... now! Leva whooshed up from the ground directly beneath Rygo, unslipped. She tried to bury her elbow between Rygo's legs, but whiffed straight through him and flew upwards. Wrong choice. But now Leva had all the information she needed. Before Rygo even realized that she had resurfaced, Leva kicked off the ceiling back down toward him, now slipped, and was rewarded with direct, heavy contact with the crown of Rygo's head. Shrieking a curse, Rygo stumbled over and clutched at the base of his neck. Seeing Leva's strategy, Fid took the opportunity to join the fight. He snatched up his extendo and darted over, slipping the tube, then wound his arms up over his head. With a furious shout, Fid swung and jammed the compacted extendo downward. Layers of frictionless cylinders sank through Rygo's foot and anchored into the crust. Then Fid unslipped the extendo and scrambled away. Rygo yelped in stunned agony. On instinct, he bucked and jerked, trying to free himself, but the extendo pinned him in place. The motion only served to make him bleed. After a moment, Rygo found himself again, and his wailing turned to a roar, and he slipped his foot and escaped. Leva recovered her breath, wondering how Fid knew that Rygo would be unslipped in that instant. Then it dawned on her. Rygo could slip specific parts of his body unpredictably, but if he unslipped his feet, Fid would see them sink into the ground. That little genius. Rygo had taken some serious damage now. The hole in his foot leaked blood, and he limped with his other side. But his head seemed mostly unaffected by Leva's blow. Looking back on her failed assault, she realized something else. Rygo's hits would crush them, but theirs would practically bounce off his sturdy frame. Leva needed to strike him from inside, like Fid did. Rygo popped a handful of sumos and grew in size, breaking their short reverie. His remaining eye bulged sickeningly, and the veins in his neck stretched as if about to burst. Ignoring his sudden increase in strength, Leva moved toward Rygo again from the side, but he turned to greet her, ready. He swatted at her with 2 hands, only one slipped. With ruthless certainty, Rygo trapped Leva in an unforgiving palm strike. One hand passed through her, but the other struck hard and sent Leva flying. Her side and shoulder clipped a stone column, cracking ribs and stealing her breath. Tumbling to the ground, Leva gasped and spat blood. The pale orange stone of the cave floor had ripped through her wings, and the ground was stained red where she landed. Fid cried out to her as Rygo barked a laugh. His gaze lit with cruel delight, and he limped toward her with fists raised again. Leva held up her hand to wave Fid off, laboring to her feet. Her side screamed from the effort, but she could barely hear it. This whole rescue plan had gone a little sour. Offhand, Leva wondered how she would explain things to Miva. Rygo struck again. With a grunt, Leva soared backward and beat her tattered wings, barely avoiding Rygo's fist and nearly crashing into the cave wall. He's faster now. She tried to squirm onto the offensive, but it was no use. She could not get near him. Fid charged his other side, and in a flash, Rygo squashed him down into the ground like a Remani worm. Leva saw Fid disappear downward. He had the good sense to semi-slip when Rygo landed the blow. This way, he was not crushed between Rygo's boot and the cave floor, but was sent down into the crust and out of battle. He could escape, slowly, but until then, Leva was alone in the fight. Fear and panic crept back in. She sucked in a breath, vaulting to avoid Rygo's onslaught. Leva could not get anywhere close to Rygo, and she had no idea how long it would take for Fid to wiggle out. Out of the corner of Leva's eye, Jua came back into view. Jua charged at Rygo, ferocious, and he faced her with a sinister smile. Given a crucial moment to recover, Leva composed herself and zipped toward the pair. Leva yelled at Jua to hold, just as Kua had commanded Leva a few lemon clicks ago. Rygo would not in the Ua lineage, not while Leva lived. Leva dipped down to grab a rock and closed her eyes, erased her face, another deep breath. Upon her inhale, she was no longer in the underground cave. She was soaring above the great billion trees on a perfect morning. She imagined the warm caress of the suns and let their existence cradle her despite their distance. On her exhale, Fid rode with her, and Pava flew with Miva behind them. Miva. Leva wanted to see her elder again so desperately, to thank her for her trust, to boast about everything that she had discovered. She must. But first, she had to get within striking distance. Leva opened her eyes and shot toward Rygo with renewed ferocity. She ducked and snapped to his right, leaving her left shoulder completely exposed. Rygo seized the bait and wound up for a punch. As his fist came toward her, Leva threw the rock. It thudded against him, doing no damage and doing nothing to impede his strike. But that wasn't why she threw it. Now she could be sure to make the right choice. Leva slipped her shoulder, and Rygo's unslipped left jab passed clean through. He moved for a final blow with his slipped right, but before Rygo could throw the punch, Leva unslipped. A searing, vision-blinding pain ripped through Leva as Rygo's left arm solidified inside of her shoulder. She felt disconnected, and she suspected her own arm might tear loose once Rygo extracted himself. As Leva predicted, Rygo yanked his arm back, wrenching Leva along with it. Following their momentum, she full slipped, sliding off of Rygo's arm toward his unslipped body. Before he could react, Leva completely burrowed into his massive chest. The moment it went dark around her, she unslipped. From inside of him, Leva felt his body tense and seize once, twice. She heard a muffled scream, and the two tumbled into a limp pile. Chapter 12, Bilia, in loving memory of Tommy Walker. If the rest of the youngers are anything like you two, Bilia is in good hands. Full slipped, Leva slid out of the cocoon of Rygo's dead body and crumpled onto the cave floor. There was no celebrating this victory. It was a brutal sight. Leva was covered head to toe in a mixture of Rygo's blood and her own, silent, weeping. The gaping hole in Leva's shoulder yawned blood down across her shirt and the tatters of her wings. Near the side of the cave, Jua fell to her knees and met the peaceful blank stare of her fallen elder, Kua. She wept alongside Leva, tears flooding her senses at the loss of a truly remarkable mentor, scholar, and leader. After a moment, Fid reappeared and wrenched himself out of the cave floor. He took in the chaotic scene. Rock, blood, and dirt pooled on the ground in a gritty, dark red reminiscent of the Bylan cave floor. His enemy lay folded on the ground, no sign of fatal wounds, but Fid could tell that the Bilian chief was no more. Curled up on the ground nearby, Fid's best friend cried, and despite the intense pain she must feel from her wounds, he knew that her tears were for Kua. There would be a time for Fid to mourn as well, but right now he needed to ease some of Leva's pain. Hazy eyes and dear friends met as Fid ran to Leva and held her close. He turned her over onto her good side. I need you to semi-slip the left half of your body, right now. Leva did as she was told. The semi-slip would ease part of the pain from her shoulder, and Fid hoped he could manage the rest. This is gonna hurt, worse than anything you've ever felt, but I have to do it, and you have to stay semi-slipped until it's done. Do you trust me? Always. Leva mustered a smile through dirt and tears, eyes closing. Fid waved Jua over to help. She held Leva's hand as she yelped, then started to scream. Fid was pulling Leva's skin and tissue back together with his bare hands. Her semi-slipped shoulder was pliable, and he had a rough idea of how to rebuild her after forming so many versions of the extendo. Fid closed Leva's major wound in the longest 15 seconds of his life. Finally, he ran his fingertips over smooth skin, soothing Leva quiet. It's done, Leva. You're okay. You did great. Jua scooted back, giving Leva space to fall flat and sob face down on the cave floor. The physical pain had lessened, but the rush of energy from their fight drained her fully and exhaustion took over. The bone inside of Leva's shoulder was practically obliterated, and the wound was sealed shut, immediate danger handled. Tears came to Fid now too. He sat with Leva as she collected herself, rubbing her back and bemoaning the life he was planning to live under the tutelage of his new mentor, who still laid next to them. He cried for Kua, who brought her people so far and came so close to rejoining Remani, only to have her life stolen from her in the cave where her torment began. Tonk and Sonk awoke, battered and concussed, but okay. Between sobs, Jua recounted the tragic battle for them. More violence trickled up. Just as Kua anticipated, Tonk and Sonk had been first, then Fid, Leva, and Kua herself, followed shortly by Jua and Mott. Hosa and Gosa came next, and to spare Jua the task, Tonk filled them in on what happened secondhand. Finally came Lyra and Kira. The violence had all made it to Raigo's cave. Now they would finish the journey together for Kua. Here. Leva strained to her feet, now pointing to a pile of boulders. Raigo must have had access to this cave to gather sumos. With the extra strength, he could have easily buried the exit in rubble. He's pulled that trick before. So that's how he did it. Fid thought back to the basement of the Igo house with Miva, when Raigo had inexplicably covered his tracks after full slipping Leva. She looked to Fid and gave a nod, as if reading his mind. We could jump the rest of the way, Leva continued, but I bet if we clear this out, we'll find stairs. Then we can walk out as one. The strong youngers hurled each rock backwards and made quick work of the task. Sure enough, they uncovered a door from the debris. As they gathered to make their final ascent, Leva floated Raigo's corpse and carried its lessened weight over her good shoulder. Jua scooped up her elder's body into a gentle cradle. Fid did the same with Koji's. Then the violins trudged up some 24 orange switchback staircases, moving, even breathing, in unison, all of them leading the way. They came to another door and stopped. Cracks of light clawed in from the gaps in the stone passageway. One more collective, unified breath, and they flung open the door to the outside world. Blinding white light overtook the group, and with every blink, the picture in front of them sharpened. The violins stood high and hidden on Igo Rock, which overlooked all of Bilia. Sharp, fresh air tickled their lungs like pen needles. Some coughed, all laughed. Elders reunited with the sons, and youngers introduced themselves for the first time. All of the survivors drank in the warmth of the day, closing their eyes and choosing a sun to turn their faces toward. I guess that's an innate behavior, Fid thought to himself, moving to do the same. Invigorated, the group clambered down the rock, youngers scampering and exploring much faster than the elders. Instead of following their route down the surface, Fid stuck his face out past the edge and semi-slipped, which allowed him to glide through the rock until he could step out at the bottom. He mentally excused Mott, Gosa, Tonk, and Lyra, who were perfectly capable of the same technique, for their less efficient descent. They're probably overwhelmed. Koji still rested in Fid's arms, as did Raigo and Leva's and Kua and Jua's. Leva fell into step with Fid. I wonder if it's rest time or rise time, Leva murmured. I guess there's no way to tell yet, Fid replied. But we're going to your place no matter what, right? Yep. They marched to the Eva residence, Bylans happily in tow. Rest time, Fid whispered, as they passed a couple billion homes with drawn shades. When they got to their destination, Miva was sitting outside. A strange sight. There on the porch, she slept soundly, planted next to the spot where Leva and Fid had plunged into Remani just a few rests ago. Tears blurred Fid's vision once again. Miva had certainly slept there each rest, awaiting their return, and here they were. -1. He looked toward his best friend and saw tears return to Leva as well. She had been uncharacteristically quiet on the walk over. Fid wondered if their perilous journey would forever change her. Leva kept, quite clearly, her bravery and her resolve, but would she laugh like she used to? Would she play and startle and poke and pry and showboat like before? Was that part of her, or just a phase from a carefree younger? Was that part of her just a phase from the carefree younger, or was it a piece of the fabric of her very being? Fid got his answer sooner than he expected. Leva turned to her new friends, head jerking toward Miva. Sorry, everyone, can you give us a minute? They nodded approvingly and slowed to a stop. Leva laid Raigo down by her companions, refastened her wings with a grunt of pain, and nodded to Fid, who piggybacked on. With grace, they flew over to Leva's sleeping elder and hung in the air in front of her for a moment. Then Leva flapped her wings, grinning and kicking up all sorts of debris on her unexpected elder. Quite an entrance. Spitting out leaves, Miva stirred awake. Her eyes flickered wide open, and, after a breath, she burst out of her chair. With a leap to rival a Bylan younger, Miva launched herself at the two floating youngers whom she held so dear. She pinched their faces, rubbed their heads, and squeezed them into her chest. Am I dreaming? Leva hiccuped through sobs of joy and relief. We're back. She seemed to deflate within Miva's embrace. We're home. And not just us, Fid gestured to the Bylans, who shifted around at Miva's gasp. The youngers waved awkwardly. Tears of joy watered Remani as Miva reunited with the several billions, now Bylans, that she once knew. Then came tears of grief for Kua, Koji, and all their beloved companions who had full-slipped and never returned. Many of those faces could forever be seen inside the planet, woven in orange and white. After the first reunion, the Bylans made their way to their respective loved ones and laid down to join Bilia in the evening's much-needed rest. Grief caught up with Fid, who could not sleep. Earlier, Miva had revealed to Leva and Fid that Raigo vanished shortly after word spread to their disappearance into Remani. No doubt he tracked them to Koji's cave and lay in wait during their entire journey, ready to intercept and punish their emergence. Raigo probably didn't expect to reunite with Kua, or any of the Bylans, but he took the opportunity to silence her all the same. Another wash of emotion, and Fid wept for Kua. The tragic circumstances she endured killerest after killerest, the sacrifices she made over and over, would never bear fruit. It was not fair. Nor was it fair to Fid, who had found someone to match his intellectual curiosity. Someone, finally, who could really teach him. As fast as she came into his life, she left it. But Kua had not left him empty-handed. Remembering the gift, Fid exploded out of his rest and rifled through his pack. Kua's tome was a treasure trove, blueprints for inventions, maps of Byla and the inside of Remani, journal entries. As he flipped through, a few of her notes caught his attention. Before I dive in, rest 32, kilo 303, approximately. Before I dive in, I tell myself yes. I yearn to explore. I was obsessed. The path I create, I wanted to take. So in I shall go, wholeheartedly so. Before I dive in, I must write it down. I must share my thoughts. Pages abound. Sometime they'll know the secrets I go, so take to the pen before I dive in. Before I dive in, I ought to prepare. Breathe in and out. I'm tortoise, not hare. I ready my mind, unsure what I'll find. I will not pretend. This may be the end. Before I dive in, I will make peace. Not with him, but within. I have foraged the last piece of strange fruit. At this point, I certainly don't expect to be found. Surely Rygo has told the village that I went mad and full-slipped into Remani, never to return. The climb back to the surface is too far. My only option now is in. If this is my final act, at least it will be one of discovery. I just hope I have enough reserves to make it all the way to the core. But before I go, I wish to document what happened between Rygo and me. Rygo and I ushered Bilia into a prosperity it had never known. We led together, he the brawn, I the brains. It was a great partnership until I started getting serious about exploring the Remani core. Up until then, he had always heard me out, valuing my opinion perhaps more than even his own. But on the subject of the core, he could not be reasoned with. He would lay out ludicrous arguments against every proposal for expeditions. This was the same Billion who dragged groups of us halfway around the world to seek out slip lemons. He never waited out storms, never took a conservative approach. It made no sense. He had no problem reaching far and wide, but never in. His elder held that same belief. Saigo was a strange, superstitious Billion, much more feeble and meek than Rygo. Staying on the surface was damn near the only thing the two of them could agree upon. Never in. But why not? Maybe Saigo was just scared? As I was preparing for my first journey into Remani, Rygo asked to show me something. He took me here, to this strange cave with glowing orange floors and orange fruits. Naturally, I was fascinated. I bent over the new orange fruits to sketch them, and then suddenly all was dark. Even when I woke up, I still did not understand that my friend had betrayed me. I only realized once I found a barricade of rubble and rock back at the entrance that he had led me through. I'm still not sure how he could have possibly destroyed so much of the cave to block all that way. I hope I live long enough to solve that mystery. Time to go. Jua has his strength. Rest 6, kilo 304 approximately. I finally understand. The orange fruits have their own power. Here I was moping about how Jua would not inherit slipping because I had no more lemons to eat when I turned 15 kilorest down here, but I didn't even consider that I might bestow another fruit's power onto her. When she eats an orange, it's like looking at a miniature Rygo. She lifts unnaturally heavy rock and can jump to extraordinary heights. It's spectacular. This must be it. The Igos must have been secretly passing down the power of these fruits for a couple generations now, starting with Saigo. It explains their freakish strength, as well as Rygo's bizarre opposition to exploring below. These fruits only grow under the crust, and if I led an expedition, we would have found them. Eventually, other youngers would inherit the same ability, and the only distinguishable Igo trait would be shared among many. Rygo trapped me here to keep his power. A note to Fid and Leva. Open if I don't survive the journey. Rest 10, kilo 323, approximately. If you're reading this, then I'm unfortunately gone. How I wish I could have had more time with you two. When you came flying out of my orange sky of rock, I regained something that I did not realize I had even lost. My curiosity. They used to call me Curious Kua. I expect similar nicknames may befall you two upon your return. Before you came, I was complacent. Our Bilan society, beautiful as it is, made me forget what had brought me there in the first place. I had stopped seeking out discovery, stopped trying to find a way out. I had conflated acceptance with resignation. I am an explorer at heart. It took a couple of rests with a couple explorers to help me remember that. Thank you. I wish I could share all I have learned with you and, even more, to make discoveries by your side. But my time has come, and I am okay with that. I can only hope that the memory of our time together, though short, will inspire you as it did me. If I may, I'd like to offer a piece of advice. Do not become complacent as I did, as Rygo did, as nearly all elders do. Your drive for exploring is what gives you life. It literally is giving my Bilans a new life. Take your time in life. Let yourself be content, but never suppress your urge to go on an adventure. You may not realize it yet, but Bilia will soon look to you for direction. Despite your age, perhaps even because of it, I believe you are more qualified than anyone for leadership. Take the opportunity. You are fit for it. I used to fear for the future of our society, but no longer. If the rest of the youngers are anything like you two, Bilia is in good hands. Finally, please share this with the Bylans. I always fancied myself an inventor. I thought I would create something spectacular. But everything I created myself pales in comparison to what we built in Byla. It is my proudest accomplishment, my happiest memory. You all brought light to our dark cave in the middle of Remani. I did more in 30 kilorests than most do in 100. I had a dream life. There was so much more I could have done, and so much more love I had to give, but even 100 would not have been enough. I'm happy. A few requests. Number 1, Bilia has much to learn from Byla. Please teach and share. Number 2, please take care of Jua for me, even though I know she'll be just fine. I'm so proud of you, Jua. Number 3, please be kind to each other. I love you all so much. Curious Kua. Salty tears smudged Kua's signature. Fid turned away to preserve the pages, but it felt good to let them fall. He thumbed through a few other interesting entries, ideas for a functioning society, tips for a safe and successful expedition, schematic of a billy boat, before finally closing his puffy eyes to rest. Kua was a prolific writer, and these records brought him some peace. Fid had thought that he had lost out on a mentor, but that was not so. Epilogue. Rest 10, Kilo 326. 3 kilorests later. Slip lemons? In unison. Check! Jumpers? Sumos? Check! Floaters? Floatberries? Check! Harnesses? Check! Buckles buckled? Check! Okay, is that every... She was already off. It's a miracle Leva had even waited that long. Attached at the hip like old times, Fid was off too. Now he watches the domino effect behind him as all of Bilia stampedes in excitement, kicking off the ground and soaring high. He throws his head back and lets out a joyful howl. Hundreds echo back through the Billion forest. Then he and all of the lemon users semi-slip their partners and themselves so that they may effortlessly slide through debris and burst out above the canopy. Happy Kua commemoration! Fid shouts to the sky. It's the second annual, Fid reminds Leva, which makes this officially a tradition. The two watch their Billion friends, all paired up as slippers and floaters or slippers and jumpers. They soar upward, just as the Bylans did 3 kilorests ago. What they find this time, though, is quite unique. At the apex, the mass of flying creatures that were not meant to fly, looks back down. Below them, woven into the tops of the great Billion trees, is a memorial. From above, the group can make out faces, Kuas, Kojis, and all of the fallen Billions who never emerged from Remani. Just like the ones in the depths of Byla, this memorial is made of thousands of bright orange sumo rides. It can only be seen from high up in the sky. Kua had always wanted to fly. Now she does. During the first half of each Kua commemoration, Billions remember and look back. During the second half, they look forward. Committees of youngers and elders gather to make plans. The Inventions Committee, led by Fid, brainstormed for Bilia's next big leap. Last year, they designed a billy boat, a Kua original meant to sail through water and rock alike. The Exploration Committee, led by Leva, maps out their next big journey. Last year, they found Pava's people, many of whom returned with them back to Bilia. The Committee, led by Jua, evaluates the systems in place that keep Bilia moving forward and proposes changes accordingly. This was Kua's vision, a collaborative, adaptable, compassionate community. When the Billy Bell rings and the celebration is done, scores of Billions return to their homes to rest. Leva and Fid linger. At the usual spot, they take turns digging up Remani worms, presenting them to one another, and reminiscing about their journey to the center of the world. To Fid, it feels like a lifetime ago. Pensive, he gently sets down Leva's Remani worm and rises to his feet. We've been all the way up there. We've been all the way down there. Fid gestures to the Remani core. He pulls out his extendo, presses it to his eye, and points to the sky. I wonder what's up there. Thank you all. Thanks so much.